If your alarm is just going off, the election, we don't have some of the results yet. A big election night continuing to unfold this morning as we are awaiting results in several key races across our country.
Yeah, usually we're the post-game show where we can tell you who won. We don't know yet. It is still a nail-biter. The balance of power in the Senate is up in the air as Democrats and Republicans are tied, as you can see right there, 48 each. You need 51 for a majority for the Republicans. Democrats just need 50 because they got the vice president.
All right, so listen to this. This is what you should be focusing on, and it's going to be unfolding throughout our show. 4 key Senate races still not called. Georgia looks like they're heading to a runoff. No one's getting 50. But we don't know for sure yet. About 95% are in. Nevada, it looks like Laxalt surged since we got up this morning. He now has a lead there, but not everybody's counted. Arizona struggling to come up with their tallies, but it looks like Masters is still far behind. And Wisconsin, Ron Johnson has not trailed, but he's just got about a half a point lead. We're closely monitoring all those races. And Ron Johnson said he's depressed that it's even close, even though he expects to win.
The House is also still up for grabs, where 218 seats are needed for control. You can see Republicans are inching closer to the majority.
Many tight races ending with some major upsets and some crucial wins for both parties.
Right, and we're watching these race boards move while we're speaking. So let's go to Kevin Cork, who's in Washington, watching and recapping it all. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, good morning, guys. You're right. We continue to await several pivotal races to wrap up, especially those out west. But as we keep an eye on that, we're talking about Senate races from Arizona to Georgia to Nevada to Wisconsin. As you pointed out, obviously that's going to determine the balance of power in Washington. And that is, of course, despite the fact that we've already seen a bevy of results come across the books, and yet we still don't know which party will lead the government moving forward. We do know that in Pennsylvania, there was no red wave to speak of, as John Fetterman, the man who struggled to speak throughout his lone debate, still somehow managed to ride the wave of a massive lead thanks to early balloting and mail-in voting to beat Dr. Oz.
We jammed them up. We held the line. I never expected that we were going to turn these red counties blue, but we did what we needed to do. That's why I'll be the next U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania.
Wow. Cannot wait to do the autopsy on that race and find out exactly how that all went down in Pennsylvania. Meantime, over in Ohio, J.D. Vance, as you know, pulled out the victory over Tim Ryan, claiming a much-heralded Senate seat in the Buckeye State.
Whether you voted for me or not, the thing that I promise to do is go to the United States Senate and fight every single day for the people of Ohio. Thanks to you, we get an opportunity to do just that. I will never forget the great people of Ohio. Thank you for this honor to serve you. I'll fight for you every day. God bless you guys, and thank you.
O-H-I-O. Meantime, barring any major surprises on the House side, Republican Kevin McCarthy and the GOP do seem poised to usher Nancy Pelosi right out of the Speaker's office.
When you wake up tomorrow, we will be in the majority and Nancy Pelosi will be in the minority. Yeah! The American people are ready for a majority that will offer a new direction, that will put America back on track. Republicans are ready to deliver it.
Kevin McCarthy speaking there. Meantime, the Democrats actually lost a number of high-profile gubernatorial races across the country. Brian Kemp, for example, knocking out Stacey Abrams in Georgia again. Beto O'Rourke losing yet another bid for political office in the great state of Texas, falling to Greg Abbott as he remains at the State House in beautiful Austin, Texas. But the news wasn't all bad for the Democrats last night. Kathy Hochul and Gretchen Whitmer both edged out their Republican opponents despite much tighter than expected races in both cases. While down in the Sunshine State, Ron DeSantis won big, and I mean really big. Look at the vote totals there, by 1.5 million votes over Charlie Crist. So much so was the impressive victory there that the New York Post is calling him the future which I thought was pretty clever. Guys, back to you.
It is.
Yeah, we have it here. I have a picture of his whole family with the future.
Yeah, three little kids came running out. He's got a wife right there beside him. Gave a really
Cancer survivor.
a really emotional.
Thank you,
impactful
Kevin.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Kevin.
so that's what Florida is obviously a positive point for the Republican Party. But we were just talking to the break. How the pollsters got it wrong. Tiffany Smiley closer than everyone thought. Bolduc within 1 point. That wasn't indeed the case. J.D. Vance, wow, the Republicans are so nervous. It's only 1 or 2 points. Tim Ryan, what a great candidate. He wins handily.
We thought she was closer
Right.
than she was to Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan.
And Carrie Lake is trailing by a point or two in Arizona.
Right. New York, Michigan, Washington State, we expected those to be very, we thought they were going to be a lot closer than they were. It was a shocker when we all learned that because they're such blue states. But we didn't expect the Republicans to trail by as much as they did.
Right. Historically, the Republican Party should have picked up a whole bunch of House seats, and they may still, because the balance of power is hanging in the balance regarding that. It's still too close to call in the Senate as well.
71 seats still at play at the beginning of our show.
Right. But here's the thing. All the polls, and the polls got them wrong, for the most part. In the polls, in the run-up to the election, the primary focus was inflation, and that's what people said. But the national exit polls run by NBC yesterday, where people came out of the polls and they said, okay, what do you think? Abortion and democracy were the two of the biggest issues with voters. When it comes to the state of Pennsylvania, why did Dr. Oz lose? Well, it looks like, according to the exit polling, it's because Fetterman won. Fetterman got 57% of the independents. Fetterman got 67% of the Hispanics. He got 57% of the women. And remember, it was just last week we were talking about that Wall Street Journal story that showed that there was a 27-point swing from suburban women from Democrats to Republicans. Fetterman, won 57% of the women. And in the state of Pennsylvania, most important issue by far was abortion, with 35%, followed by inflation at 29%, and crime was 11%. And that is what drove people to the polls. And then when you look at the exit polling regarding Herschel Walker, in Georgia, Herschel Walker got only 8% of the black voter, got 42% of the independents, and 39% of the Hispanics. So he did not wind up with any majorities in those demographics.
Well, when you look at our state in New York, Zeldin didn't win. Well, he hasn't come out and said that Kathy Hochul, he hasn't conceded, yes. But it looks like he is not going to win. And the Republican refugees here have flocked to Florida, have gone to Tennessee, have gone to Texas, to these states where you can be a Republican and you're cheered. Conservatism just works down in the state of Florida. Look at DeSantis. I mean, Florida does not have a single Democratic holding statewide. Marco Rubio swept that area. He's the first Republican in Florida to win a third 6-year term as a senator. He was outraised. He was outspent by Val Demings, and he still did well. So Republicans have flocked to Florida. It has now turned to a red state. You remember when George W. Bush was running, and he only won the presidency by 500 votes.
Went to the Supreme Court.
Exactly. It has changed dramatically in Florida.
I would add this. The House may go to Republicans, likely to go, because of New York. They flipped about 5 or 6, it looks like, major seats, including taking out the chairman of the Democratic Congressional Committee. So New York is fed up. They maybe had the benefit of having a legitimate contender as a governor. Nothing against Rob Astorino, but he never got the support. You're talking about a Republican who is out-registered 2 or maybe 3 to 1, got 47% of the vote, and I think that helped everyone down ticket. Now, about a half hour ago, Mayor of Miami joined us, also an up-and-coming Republican star. I want to get his analysis of why the Hispanic vote helped fuel the Republican success in Florida. Here's what he said.
Well, you have to look at the trend of what's happening. I mean, in 2016, Donald Trump lost Miami-Dade County by 30 points to Hillary. In 2020, that 30-point margin was just an 8-point margin in favor of Biden. And now you're seeing Miami-Dade County go completely red by double digits, both for Marco and for the governor. I think it means that people in Miami-Dade County and in Florida, by the way, you win Miami-Dade County, you have a great chance of winning Florida by a huge margin. And we saw that also last night, a 20-point margin in Florida, which is unheard of for a Republican candidate. I think it sets a template for how we can win nationally.
And the thing about Miami-Dade County is Joe Biden won it by 85,000 points. So for Ron DeSantis to win by double digits, that says something. We saw Kevin McCarthy there in the sound bites from Kevin Corke, and as it turns out, he was going to take the stage at a D.C. hotel last night at 10 o'clock. Wound up eventually speaking, I think, at 1 or 2 in the morning, and said that predicted the Republicans would win the House. Jackie Heinrich from our White House unit said that a Republican source told her that the knives are out for Kevin McCarthy. If he is under 225 House seats in the Republican column, expect Scalise to make a move quickly for Speaker.
Which is unbelievable because he has raised so much money for so many candidates, and McCarthy brought the Republicans to within 5 seats in 2020 of the House when no one gave him that shot. I'd be shocked if there was a legitimate run at his power.
I would too. Well, Kevin McCarthy is predicting that Nancy Pelosi will find herself in the minority this morning, and hopefully we'll find out quickly.
All right.
Maybe within our show. Let's go over to Carly Shimkus. We'll find out what she's doing with the news.
Yes, that's right, guys. And we're going to start here with America's crime crisis. Police in Georgia searching for 2 suspects in a deadly shooting following an hours-long SWAT standoff. A 25-year-old man was shot and killed in a residential area, and authorities believe the suspects barricaded themselves in an apartment complex nearby. But there was no sign of them when heavily armed officers breached the building. To a Fox weather alert now, thousands of Florida residents told to evacuate as Tropical Storm Nicole approaches the state's east coast. Residents are filling sandbags to prepare for the storm, which has top wind speeds of 70 miles per hour. Many people are lining up at gas stations and panic buying food and water, leaving some store shelves already empty. You can follow this developing story by downloading the Fox weather app for the latest on the storm. The man accused of throwing a hard seltzer can at Texas Senator Ted Cruz is now charged with aggravated assault. Prosecutors reveal he blurted out, "I'm an idiot," as officers took him into custody. Cruz was targeted while celebrating with the Houston Astros at their World Series victory parade. This footage shows a white claw skimming his face. Luckily, he was not hurt. And Tiger Woods will be back on the golf course next month. Woods will team up with Rory McIlroy to take on PGA Tour star Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth in the next installment of the match on December 10th. Woods hasn't competed since missing the cut at the Open Championship in July. The 12-hole made-for-TV match also raising money for Hurricane Ian relief efforts. So a great cause there, guys.
And a lot of people are going to watch that.
Yes.
That'll be great.
I'm pulling for him.
Right.
I'm going to do so well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carly.
Thanks, Carly. Meanwhile, coming up straight ahead, history made. Sarah Huckabee Sanders becomes the first female elected governor of Arkansas, following in her father's footsteps.
The former governor and very proud father, there he is, beaming. Mike Huckabee is going to join us next to talk about his daughter's big win last night.
Did he shave his beard?
The honor of a lifetime to serve as Arkansas's 47th governor and the first female governor the state of Arkansas has ever had. I think my dad's the best governor Arkansas has ever had, one of the best governors the country has ever seen, and I'm hoping to take that title away from him pretty soon.
Sarah Huckabee Sanders makes history as the first female elected governor in Arkansas, an office that was no stranger to the family, once being held by her father, as you heard and as you know. And that proud dad, Mike Huckabee, joins us now. How are you feeling this morning?
Well, I'm feeling pretty excited. It was a great night for the Huckabee family, a wonderful night for Sarah. She worked really hard. It was a tough race. She had a very formidable opponent, but when it was all settled, over 63% of the vote. I'd call that a landslide. I think anybody would take that kind of margin. It was very, very, I think, just indicative of a state that has decided that Sarah is going to be a great governor. And her dad agrees with that, by the way.
Well, she was able to watch your highs and your lows as governor. What advice do you have for her?
Be true to the state of Arkansas. Love the people. Serve them regardless of whether they voted for her. In fact, spend more time trying to serve the people who didn't vote for her and prove that she's a governor for everybody. But main thing, make every decision not based on the political consequences. Just make the decisions that you think are right and that help the most people, especially the ones who can't pay you back, who have nothing to give you. Make sure you never forget them.
We interviewed her yesterday, and she said she believes this is the first time this has ever happened in our country, where a father was elected governor and then his daughter is elected years later. And she lived in the governor's mansion. I don't know how old. How old was she then? Was she little or a teenager?
Yeah, she was in junior high when we first moved in there, so she spent a good deal of her growing up there, and most of her life she spent growing up in politics, you know, in various races that I was involved in. So it's been an exciting thing. It is historic. First time ever for a father-daughter in the same state. It's also going to be historic in that the lieutenant governor is female, so you have the first ever in America governor and lieutenant governor who are both women.
That's great. Women are really stepping up to leadership roles. And look at the history of the White House press secretaries. Dana Perino's here. Kayleigh McEnany's here. They're very successful. Now your daughter is becoming governor. Is it going to be a little interesting or a little weird when you walk into the governor's mansion and your daughter's living where her parents used to live?
It's going to be a little strange. I think the funny part is when her children try to hide from her on that 9-acre campus.
She knows where the
they're
hiding
not going to be
places
able
are.
to do it. She knows where they are.
That's
and,
right.
you know, it's going to be fun for me to watch that as the grandfather. But I'm excited for her. I'm excited for the state. And I think that she will bring some fresh ideas. And most of all, she will bring the heart of a mom. And that's something that will be different and new. And I think it will be a wonderful opportunity to show that there is, you know, an instinct that she has about children, about their health and their education, that she's going to take to the governor's mansion in a very strong and powerful way.
She's relatable because of that to women, and it's sweet to see Ron DeSantis' family. You love to see the little kids on stage and know that he's raising little ones, and Sarah's doing the same. So God bless you. Please tell her congratulations. Thank you for coming on this morning.
You bet, Ainsley. Thank you.
You're welcome. Coming up, Ohio is sending Trump-backed candidate J.D. Vance to the Senate in one of the biggest wins of the night for the Republican Party. Our political panel shares their biggest takeaways from the night. Coming up next.
All right, we're still awaiting results for Arizona's gubernatorial and Senate races, but election officials say they won't have all the votes counted until Friday. What is with Arizona? Kelly O'Grady joins us live from Phoenix with more. Hey, Kelly, we know there was a problem in Maricopa County. Are there other problems?
You know, we're not hearing that right now. You know, there was that voting issue in Maricopa County with the printers, but really we're waking up to a lack of clarity in what is now becoming really important when it comes to the Senate. I heard you mention that we won't really have clarity until Friday. That's because we don't expect 95 to 99% of the votes to come in until then. I want to take a look at what's happening in the Senate race right now. So about 63% reporting Democratic incumbent Mark Kelly leading by roughly 6 points. Now, Kelly heavily won there in the early voting, but Masters has been closing that gap overnight as day of voting data trickles in. And we are seeing the batches skew heavily for the GOP, but with just about 100,000 votes separating them, it's unclear if Masters can make that up. On the governor's side, it's a lot tighter. Kari Lake inching closer to opponent Katie Hobbs, just about 30,000 votes separating the two right now. And I do want to highlight that Lake has been winning the last few batches by about 70 to 80%. Now, one of the big storylines I mentioned off the top has been that voting issue. 27% of the counting machines in Maricopa County were down for a period yesterday. Now, officials identified the problem was with the printers. They were apparently not producing dark enough ink to properly mark and have those ballots counted. Nonetheless, the RNC losing a last-minute suit against the county to keep the polls open an extra 3 hours last night. The judge didn't find evidence that the issue impacted residents from voting. Now, those voting snafus mean a lot of Maricopa County ballots are still outstanding, so they're going to start tabulating in a little bit, and we'll have more coming in for you soon, Brian.
All right, thanks so much, and we'll follow that, obviously, as Carrie Lake closing rapidly. Let's go over to Carly Shimkus. Carly, you have more breaking news, then we're going to break down the other races.
Very good. Yeah, we're going to start here with this, though, Brian. On the news, a serial burglar arrested 10 times last year in Florida is back in custody after police say they were caught red-handed. The suspect is accused of striking a detective after fleeing the scene. Police say he hit at least 9 homes where tourists were sleeping after serving what police say was a brief sentence. North Korea test firing another ballistic missile overnight, this one landing in the sea off of Japan just minutes after launch. Meanwhile, South Korea's military recovering debris from a North Korean missile fired towards the south amid a barrage of sea launches from last week. Some flak recovered, including parts of a Soviet-era anti-craft weapon dating back to the 1960s. Brooklyn Nets guard Kyrie Irving met with NBA Commissioner Adam Silver yesterday. That, according to reports, the two were said to be discussing a potential path forward after the Nets suspended Irving without pay after he refused to disavow a movie with an anti-Semitic message he shared on Twitter. He's since deleted that tweet. Irving would reportedly need to complete 6 unspecified steps before he can rejoin the Nets. After giving out free donuts on Election Day, Krispy Kreme is rolling out another holiday special, mini pie donuts. There are 4 flavors, pecan or pecan, depending on how you say it, pumpkin, lemon cream, and Dutch apple. The donuts are available now in 16-count packs. Those are your headlines. Brian, over to you.
All right, let's get into it now. It's the Buckeye State. Let's start there. Is sending Trump-backed Senate candidate J.D. Vance to a substantial victory. He wins in Ohio, and he takes Senator Portman's seat.
Whether you voted for me or not, the thing that I promise to do is go to the United States Senate and fight every single day for the people of Ohio. Thanks to you, we get an opportunity to do just that. I will never forget the great people of Ohio. Thank you for this honor to serve you. I'll fight for you every day. God bless you guys, and thank you.
All right, let's break down what we know so far and what we have yet to know to see where it's possibly going. Our political panel is here, and they're great. They are Fox News contributor, former Wisconsin Congressman Sean Duffy's with us right now. Fox News contributor and Wall Street Journal columnist Jason Riley. And playing to my immediate right, because she lives closest to me in real life, former Nassau County Executive Laura Curran. As a Democrat, Laura, for you tonight, are you surprised the Democrats aren't trying to explain a red wave because it never happened?
It never happened, and I know a lot of Democrats were expecting this. I think we were all expecting this sort of cleansing thing to happen, and we're going to have some kind of answer about the direction of the country. And we just didn't get that. It was a mixed bag everywhere, a lot of close races, and kind of a big meh.
And the main reason you believe is abortion?
Yes, I think we were talking about this before. I think the fear of Trump and the fear of government overreach with abortion was a motivating factor for voters who might have been concerned about crime and the economy, but these two things kind of kept them from saying, oh, I think I'm going to go for the safe bet.
Blake Masters currently still in a race, but he is a Trump-backed candidate in Arizona. We know J.D. Vance was a Trump-backed candidate in Ohio, and he did win a substantial win. But, Jason, you know who didn't win? Mastriano didn't win as governor's race in Pennsylvania. You know who didn't win? Don Baldock, who was picked on Monday, and Dr. Oz didn't win with Fetterman.
Yeah, it was a mixed bag for Trump-backed candidates, and that's going to be part of the post-mortem. But we shouldn't underestimate what Republicans did accomplish. It looks like they're going to take back the House of Representatives. That's going to be a huge check on the Biden agenda. No matter how big or small that majority is, if Republicans control the House, they have subpoena power, they can do investigations, and they can make sure that the Biden agenda doesn't really go anywhere for the next 2 years. That's a very big deal. So Republicans did not have the night they were hoping for, but they accomplished what they needed to do at a minimum, which is to take back at least one House of Congress. And we still don't know about the Senate yet. But in terms of Trump and his candidates, yes, it was a very mixed bag last night.
Two winners, no doubt about it, is Kemp and DeSantis.
Yes, both of them have been in Trump's crosshairs recently, and they had very, very big nights, so I don't think Donald Trump is happy about that. Particularly DeSantis. I mean, what he did was quite amazing in Florida last night.
It's a great speech,
and we'll see what he does with those victories going forward.
Very interesting what happened in Florida. It's one of the fascinating stories. If success leaves clues, maybe Republicans should go to school on that. Sean Duffy in Wisconsin, Ron Johnson went to bed, says, listen, I didn't win yet, and that's depressing. I'm up by one, I'll likely win, but this is why people don't get into politics.
Right. So Ron Johnson...
He didn't want it to be close. He's like, how could Mandela Barnes be close to me?
He's not always a sunny side egg, right? He's sometimes can be a little dour. Listen, this is his third term in Wisconsin as a U.S. Senator. Right. I mean, this is a big night for Wisconsin and for Ron Johnson. Make no mistake of that. Going back to this issue, I do think it was Trump and abortion on the ballot. And I think a lot of pro-lifers would say, listen, I'm so happy with the Dobbs decision. If we don't have a great red wave midterm and it was the abortion issue, the Dobbs decision, we will take that every day of the week. So it's still a win for pro-lifers. And to Jason's point, I mean, to have the House is a really big deal. We're firing Nancy Pelosi this morning. Kevin McCarthy is going to be the speaker. And the power of oversight. I mean, I thought we were going to have some legislative problems if Republicans take the House and the Senate. How do you get a pathway moving forward to get legislation done? But with only one chamber, they're going to focus on oversight. They're going to hold this administration accountable, and that's a big win for Republicans.
Voters wanted a check on Biden's agenda. I think that is a big lesson of what came out of last night. I will also say that, according to the exit polls, the GOP continued to do well with minority voters.
Right.
They increased their numbers among blacks, among Hispanics, and among Asians. So, again, they didn't have the night they wanted to.
And the working class.
And
the working class,
47 independents did go to Democrats. Lori, interesting in New York.
Yeah.
5 seats flipped Republican. Do you really believe that New York might deliver the House for the Republicans?
It could happen on Long Island. All 4 seats went Republican. There were 2 blue. Now there are 4 red. So while the governor won, God bless, Governor Hochul won, but the messaging, that national narrative about Democrats being terrible on crime and the economy and all of this smeared some very good moderate Democrats on Long Island, Robert Zimmerman and Laura Gillen. They were painted with this broad brush. They're not, what you want to call crazy progressives. They're moderate, sensible, fiscally responsible Democrats, and they were swept out.
And Lee Zeldin did, so you know him, Suffolk County guy.
Yeah.
But he did surprisingly well for a guy that's affiliated with Trump, known as a conservative. He looks like he's got within 4 points.
Yes, that's right. And that was, I kind of guessed it would be about that. But he's a Long Island guy. He comes from a regular working class family. And he ran, I have to hand it to him, he ran a flawless campaign.
Real quick, your prediction on the Senate, do you think it's going to come down to Georgia?
Georgia and Nevada, it looks like, will be the 2 states. So, yeah.
And Nevada, relax, salt up.
Yeah. We could be where we were 2 years ago with a runoff, waiting another month for control of the Senate. Just one other point. Sean Patrick Maloney may lose his seat. He's the DCCC chair in New York City. That is the biggest scalp of the night. Highest-ranking Democrat to lose his seat.
Great point, guys. Great panel. I owe you some extra money. I'll pay you. All right, meanwhile, you can catch me on the road. I'm going to Mississippi. Catch me in Brandon, Mississippi. And then I'm going right to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and then to Oklahoma City the next day. On stage, talking about all red, white, and blue stuff, and the president and freedom fighter to close it out. Go catch me. Go to briankilmeade.com. Fox Nation's co-producing it, too. You might be getting something free if you arrive in person. Coming up straight ahead. Control of Congress still hanging in the balance this morning, but Republicans are seeing some victories in deep blue New York, as we just discussed. One of them, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, won her race handily. She'll join us next and talk about her leadership role.
A couple of races still too close to call. As of now, the U.S. House of Representatives still up for grabs. You can see Republicans are inching closer to that majority where, as you can see, 218 seats are needed for control. Right now, the Republicans have 200. They need 18 more.
Some races seeing major victories, including our next guest. who won a 5th term, beating her Democratic opponent by 20 points, despite millions spent against her. We have joining us now House Republican Conference Chair, New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik. Good morning.
Good morning. Great to be with you this morning.
It's so good to have you on. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great, and I'm so grateful and humbled by the overwhelming support in my district. As you all know, and as viewer knows, we just went through redistricting in every congressional district across the country, but it was a particular battle in New York State. So I have new constituents that I'm honored to earn the support, and of course constituents who I've represented for a long time, and we ran on our record of results. And I was also proud to help lead the effort to pick up a number of seats for Republicans in New York State.
Great. Congratulations. The Republicans did pick up some seats in New York State, but what happened to the red wave, Congresswoman? We thought this morning we'd be talking about how clearly the Republicans had the majority in the House. Didn't know about the Senate, but we thought for sure in the House, and still it's unknown.
Well, Steve, as we're looking at some of these races, we feel confident that we're going to win the House, and we will fire Nancy Pelosi, and there will be a Republican majority, and that's really important. That was my top priority as the House Republican Conference Chair. And look, we're going to win the majority in New York State alone. If you look at the 4 seats we picked up on election night, firing Sean Patrick Maloney, a Democrat in leadership, Mike Lawler, of course, won that seat in the lower Hudson Valley. We picked up 2 in the Hudson Valley, 2 on Long Island. Anthony D'Esposito, former NYPD officer, was a pickup. George Santos was also a pickup. And then we have races like the Connecticut race with our amazing candidate, George Logan. We think that goes our way as well. So you can build the majority just out of our inroads in the Northeast. And there's positive news across this country. We elected more Republican women, which that number is going to grow in the next Congress, which I have been very focused on in recruiting and supporting those women. In Florida, we picked up 4 seats. And of course, our top of the ticket did very well. And we flipped Miami-Dade County, which is really, really important and shows the inroads we're making among Hispanics. So let's wait until these races are called, but we will win the majority thanks to the American people.
And by the way, one of those seats that did flip was George Santos. He had joined Fox and Friends first. Listen.
I kept the entire race about the people. I kept it about the issues that were hurting Americans here in the 3rd District, whether it's inflation, whether it's crime, whether it's the high cost of energy and education for our kids. That's what my campaign was all about. While my opponent spent his entire campaign smearing me, when you run a campaign and you don't offer real ideas or solutions to the problems at hand, you can't win.
And, you know, part of the reason I think Long Island is so drastically different from, and Staten Island and upstate, so drastically different from Manhattan. But Manhattan carried the day in New York. Elise, are you running to keep that leadership position among the caucus now that you're in the majority?
I am running for re-election as House Republican Conference Chair. We have been disciplined in our message, and we successfully prosecuted the case against Joe Biden's multiple crises. We won, if you talk to voters, on the issue of inflation, and we have to stop that reckless spending. We need to do strong work to secure the border. We need to support our law enforcement. And I'm the only member of leadership who's flipped a district. People forget my district voted twice for Obama, and we now win historic Republican victories. So we have to deliver for the American people, and I'm committed to doing that.
All right. So wants to be chair of the House Republican Conference again and not considering a run for House Majority Whip. That was in the press.
And she's predicting a win for Republicans. Elise, thank you very much for joining us live.
Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Quarter before the top of the hour, Janice Dean is keeping an eye on a storm that is bearing down on Florida.
Yes, indeed, we are. I'll get to that in just a second. What's your name, sir? Where are you from?
Bobby Wadiak. I'm from New Jersey.
And where do you want to say hi to?
I'm sorry to my wife, Jamie. I love you, baby.
Very nicely done. Okay, let's take a look at Florida because we do have a storm system that's going to move into eastern Florida, the coast there, and we could have a hurricane in the next 6 to 12 hours. We are expecting an impact later on this evening, overnight tonight, and then we could see the storm move into the Gulf of Mexico and then go up towards the Panhandle, eventually towards the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. Hurricane warnings are in effect, so hurricane conditions, and this storm is huge, 400 miles from the center of circulation, at least tropical storm force winds. So this is going to impact much of Florida in the next 48 hours, and then it's going to visit us up towards the Northeast as we get into the weekend. So all eyes are on Florida. We will certainly keep you up to date throughout the day today. FoxWeather.com for your latest details. All right, Steve Ainsley Bryan, over to you.
All right, thank you very much. It's good to see that Navy veteran. Meanwhile, coming up straight
He
ahead.
loves his wife.
Yes, he does. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp wins re-election big time, but a different story in the Senate with a neck-and-neck race between Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock.
Former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, on the latest in the Peach State.
Georgia Governor Brian Kemp claiming victory in his re-election bid last night, beating Democrat Stacey Abrams for the second time by, look at that, close to 8 points. But we're still waiting for the results of that Senate race, which is too close to call, although Mr. Walker is trailing Mr. Warnock. Connell McShane is live from Atlanta with more. Connell?
Hey there, Steve. You know, it's interesting. I'm looking back at a conversation we had yesterday on Election Day with a Gwinnett County, Georgia voter who told us he had just voted for Governor Brian Kemp, but he didn't vote at all in the Senate race. And clear from those numbers you just showed, he's not the only one who is thinking in that way or doing something like that in the race. A tale of two different Republican performances. You have Governor Kemp, who I know is going to be a live guest with you guys in the next hour, winning re-election, and he certainly outperformed what we saw from Herschel Walker on the Senate side. And if you look again at those numbers, that was a relatively easy win for Governor Kemp, at least by recent Georgia standards, and certainly a wider margin than what we saw the matchup that he had with Stacey Abrams 4 years ago. Compare those numbers and percentages, though, to the Senate side. And here again, the key is that both Warnock and Walker are below 50% and do appear headed to that December 6th runoff.
So y'all just hang in there. I'm feeling good. We always knew that this race would be close.
I'm like Ricky Bobby. I don't come to lose. And I told you he's going to be tough to beat. He's going to be tough to beat, but let me tell you what, he got the wrong Georgia here, don't he?
Now, Warnock, for what it's worth, does have experience in runoffs. It's how he won his seat in the first place, after all. That was January the 5th of 2021. Just point out one note from our Fox voter analysis. We come back to you. 93% of voters that we spoke to say they considered Senate control when they were making their decision. They might get to make that very same decision all over again. Steve?
All right, Connell, thank you very much. Let's talk to Fox News contributor and former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich. Newt, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Well, it looks like down in Georgia there was some ticket splitting because people, presumably Republicans or independents, the people who voted for Brian Kemp did not also vote for Herschel Walker, or else Herschel would be further ahead, right?
Yeah, I think first of all, Governor Kemp, like many Republican governors, had a big night. Probably spent the end of Stacey Abrams' career in politics. I think that Herschel did not get all of the votes that the governor did, obviously, or that race would be over. So it looks like it's going to go to a runoff. Governor Kemp has a huge ability, I think, to influence that runoff. And this will be the second time that Warnock's ended up on a runoff. So I don't know what that says about how narrow the margins are in Georgia. Right. But everywhere in the country, governors had a big night. Kemp is an example, but you look at the scale of the Republican governor victories. That's something, we did not do as well in the House and Senate as I thought we would do, and as I said on this show I thought we'd do. So there's a lot to study about what happened. We did very well with governors, and in that sense, it was a huge night for Republican government at the state level.
You know, Newt, you're absolutely right. The big red wave that was predicted has not happened yet, and the balance of power still hangs in the balance. But according to national exit polls, it looks like abortion and democracy were two big issues with people who actually voted. And they're right now, Republicans are at 200 in the House. They need 218. So abortion and democracy were foremost in people's minds, but in the run-up, everybody was just talking about inflation.
Yeah, well, as I said, I was surprised because I thought with the inflation rate and the price of food and the price of gasoline, with the crime rate that we have seen, with the border as open as it is, with some 4 million plus people coming across illegally, I thought all those things would have made for a very big Republican night. And I have to say, much as I think it's despicable, the Biden strategy of demonizing Republicans and attacking Republicans and defaming Republicans, I think did have an impact and will probably become part of the definition of the Democratic Party.
Sure. You know, there was a red wave, though, in the state of Florida. Ron DeSantis is going to wind up winning by close to 20 points.
You know, I think Governor DeSantis is the biggest single winner of the night, and he will almost certainly become the rallying point for everybody in the Republican Party who wants to move beyond President Trump, which would make for a pretty remarkable race. DeSantis did very well, but so, frankly, did Marco Rubio. He did almost as well. And President Trump was in Miami with Rubio 2 nights before the Republicans swept Dade County, which, as you know, is unheard of. Governor Bush once did it, but other than that, Republicans have never had the kind of margin in Dade County that both Rubio and DeSantis got. I think DeSantis is the biggest single winner of the night, and that's going to resonate across the whole country. But Republican governors in general, like Governor Kemp, like Sununu, like DeWine, Abbott, all of them did very, very well last night.
All right. Newt Gingrich joined us with the post-game show. Newt, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Still ahead, as we were just talking about, it's all sunshine for Republicans in Florida with a series of victories all across the one-time swing state. We're going to hear from Paulina Luna, who flipped a House seat red, and talk more about Ron DeSantis' big win in Miami-Dade County. So the big question is, which party will control what goes on under that big top in our nation's capital? It's Wednesday morning, but the battle for control of Congress continues today as we wait for the results in a number of crucial races in both the House and the Senate.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. We know there's no red wave. We got it. We actually could see one party in control of both chambers. The balance of power in the Senate, for example, is up in the air. Democrats and Republicans now tied at 48 each. 51 needed, obviously, for the majority. We might be able to call one before we get off the air.
Yeah, 4 key Senate races are still not called yet. It's Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, and Wisconsin. And we are closely monitoring those races as the results come in, as you said, hopefully this hour while we're on air.
Nevada's switched since we've got on air. Laxalt seems to be pulling away.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives also still up for grabs. As you can see up in the right-hand corner, a majority of 218 is needed. And Republicans only have 200 so far. That big red wave has not yet materialized.
Many tight races, ending with some stunning upsets and some critical wins for both parties.
We go to Kevin Cork. He is live in Washington for the latest there. Good morning to you, Kevin.
Steve, Ainsley, and BK, game on, as in the waiting game, as the nation continues to await results, as you all have been pointing out, from several pivotal Senate and gubernatorial races around the country. We are looking at the numbers to see which party will ultimately control which chamber of commerce, or make that chamber of Congress. In Arizona, let's take a look. Masters right now surging, but still trailing. Kelly out in front, 51.9 to 45.9. But again, Blake Masters, he's making some progress there. We'll see how that all turns out. As for the gubernatorial race there, same storyline, frankly, for Kari Lake. She was down big early because Hobbs had a massive lead to start out with the mail-in balloting and with the early voting, but as you see, Kari Lake is reeling her in now with a 30,000 vote difference, and of course we'll keep an eye on that one. Over in Nevada, Laxalt again was down big early, but boy, has he come roaring back over in the Silver State, now leading 49.9 to 47.2. In Wisconsin, little Badger love there. Let's check out Ron Johnson. Yep, he's now leading, but boy, is it tight. 50.6 to 49.4 44 over Barnes. There has been a call for Johnson, at least according to one service. We are not yet calling that here at Fox. Over in the great state of Georgia, Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock dueling down the stretch they come with a runoff, as Casey mentioned earlier, very likely yet to come here in the weeks ahead, 49.4 to 48.5. How about in Pennsylvania? John Fetterman riding the wave again of massive early and mail-in voting to beat Dr. Oz.
We jammed them up. We held the line. I never expected that we were going to turn these red counties blue, but we did what we needed to do. That's why I'll be the next U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania.
And there'll be lots of study to see exactly how they turn some of those places from red to blue. Meantime, in Ohio, J.D. Vance pulling ahead, and he sends Tim Ryan and his light beer packing, getting an important victory for the GOP in the Buckeye State.
Whether you voted for me or not, the thing that I promise to do is go to the United States Senate and fight every single day for the people of Ohio. Thanks to you, we get an opportunity to do just that. I will never forget the great people of Ohio. Thank you for this honor to serve you. I'll fight for you every day. God bless you guys, and thank you.
They may have the coolest state flag. Really like that. Meanwhile, barring any major surprises on the House side, yep, the GOP could be tight, could be 220, maybe 224, but at least right now, all projections would suggest that Kevin McCarthy and the GOP will send Nancy Pelosi packing from the Speaker's office.
When you wake up tomorrow, we will be in the majority and Nancy Pelosi will be in the minority. Yeah. The American people are ready for a majority that will offer a new direction, that will put America back on track. Republicans are ready to deliver it.
And now's the chance to do just that. Meantime, let's take a look at some of those high-profile gubernatorial races around the country. Brian Kemp, no problem, beating Stacey Abrams in Georgia again. Beto O'Rourke in Texas, facing off with Greg Abbott, losing again. But the news wasn't all bad for the Democrats as far as gubernatorial races were concerned. Kathy Hochul and Gretchen Whitmer both edged out their Republican opponents despite tighter than expected races. So as I mentioned, a runoff likely in the great state of Georgia. It could change, but unlikely between now and then. We'll also keep a very close eye on what's happening in Arizona and, of course, Nevada as well. A fun morning for us. I hope before the show's over, we get to call another race, guys.
Yeah, let's do it. Even if it's premature. Just
No.
so we get.
No.
We're waiting for somebody to call us on the red phone. All right, Kevin, thank you very much.
You got to figure, too, if there is a runoff, the Libertarian goes away. It is just Warnock against Walker. And if Joe Biden is so unpopular in Georgia, if it becomes about the balance of power in the Senate, which it looks like it will be, that will be advantage Walker.
Well, and you've got to wonder about what impact, if Donald Trump does make an announcement next week, what impact that would have on races going forward. Kevin just ran a soundbite with J.D. Vance, who came up a big winner yesterday, and he can thank in large part, according to the Wall Street Journal, Mitch McConnell's Senate Leadership Fund. They pumped $32 million into that race. In mid-October, Vance had only raised $12 million. Tim Ryan had about $50 million. And then that money that the McConnell Super PAC pumped into that race was able to change Tim Ryan's public perception with the people who were watching TV, because they bought a whole bunch of ads. And at that point, Tim Ryan had been ahead in the polls, but thanks to the big money, that really helped Mr. Vance win last night.
Yeah, and here in New York, a huge red wave out in your area, out on Long Island, four congressmen and women.
Yeah, that 4, maybe 5 by the end of our show have taken over. They might provide the balance of power to Republicans in the House.
And Florida, too. Florida and New York, a big red wave in that area out on Long Island. Also in upstate, Elise Stefanik won again, and that's an area where Barack Obama won twice. Staten Island, of course, went red, as we were expecting. New York City, very Democratic. Lots of people have left. We have a migration issue here in New York City because a lot of the Republicans left to go down to Florida after the pandemic. They lived down there. They said, this is great. We're an open state. We're staying. So Lee Zeldin, it looks like he is not going to pull off the governor's race here in the state of New York. He has not conceded, says he will not do that yet. Elise Stefanik was on our show earlier, and she wants another term as the chair of the House Republican Conference. There was word that she might run for the House Majority Whip, but she says no, she wants to be the House Republican Conference. Yes, and that's right. She took over for Liz Cheney. President Trump said that she would be fantastic in that role, and he supports Kevin McCarthy as the House Speaker if the Republicans take over the House. But here's Elise Stefanik talking about yesterday's election.
We're looking at some of these races. We feel confident that we're going to win the House, and we will fire Nancy Pelosi, and there will be a Republican majority, and that's really important. That was my top priority as the House Republican Conference chair. And look, we're going to win the majority in New York State alone. If you look at the 4 seats we picked up on election night, we won if you talk to voters on the issue of inflation, and we have to stop that reckless spending. We need to do strong work to secure the border. We need to support our law enforcement. And I'm the only member of leadership who's flipped a district. People forget my district voted twice for Obama, and we now win historic Republican victories. So we have to deliver for the American people, and I'm committed to doing that.
Well, one place where there was a great big red wave is depicted on the cover of the New York Post this morning. Young GOP star DeSantis romps to victory in Florida. It's called The Future. And when you look at what we know for sure, we know that, according to the numbers, he beat Charlie Crist by 19 points so far. But when you look at the exit polls, and I'm looking at some by Edison Research exit polling, Ron DeSantis won Hispanic voters by 57%, women voters by 52%, suburban voters by 58%, and independents by 52%. His share of the Puerto Rican vote jumped from 34 to 55. It went up 20 points between the two races, his first and his second. And DeSantis' victory was fueled, of course, as we've been talking about, by the strongest showing by a Republican in Miami-Dade County in decades.
Do you think it's because so many New Yorkers and people from other states have moved down to Florida? They did not take their politics with them, or maybe they were all Republicans and they took their politics with them?
I think a couple of things. I think it's performance. I mean, the last case in point, Hurricane Ian. President Biden comes down. They clearly disagree on a number of issues, totally bipartisan. He's building bridges to get people back to their islands to see their homes. And then you think what happened during the pandemic. He was on the phone on a daily basis with the CDC trying to find out what was happening. His only regret was he shut his state down at all. Right. And then he empowered people. He had a plan in place to cycle the vaccine for people who wanted it. He got kids back in school. And if you didn't like that, you could leave the state. But for the most part, people go, yeah, I like to get my life back. I'm coming there.
Florida does not have a single Democrat holding a statewide office now, and it's pretty clear they have shifted from purple to red. Remember when George W. Bush won by just 500 votes in Florida? It has changed so much, and Joe Concha calls it ruby red, but the blue states have become a deeper blue.
Rubio red in Florida.
Rubio red.
Ron DeSantis, I was at a diner down at Harry and the Natives in Hobe Sound on Friday. People love him. They just love him in Florida. And here he is last night, and I want you to listen to the chanting. They're not chanting 4 more years. They're chanting 2 more years, which means they're encouraging him to run for president. Here he is last night.
After 4 years, the people have delivered their verdict. Freedom is here to stay. We saw freedom in our very way of life and so many other jurisdictions in this country wither on the vine. Florida held the line. We chose facts over fear. We chose education over indoctrination. We chose law and order over rioting and disorder. Florida was a refuge of sanity when the world went mad. We stood as a citadel of freedom for people across this country and indeed across the world.
Just one other thing about the Florida race, and that is I spent the weekend down in Florida, and I was watching a lot of the TV. The DeSantis ad that I saw a number of times was all about his accomplishments. Charlie Crist was, running the typical negative ad about what a bad job Mr. DeSantis had done. But when you see it all lined up, all the stuff that Ron DeSantis has gotten accomplished as governor, you can understand why the number is so big, where he beat Charlie Crist by 19 points.
Why do you think he did so well in Miami-Dade?
Because I think Florida freedom. I don't think you feel like you're walking in voting as a party. Mm-hmm. It's like I'm voting how I feel as somebody living in Florida, and I think they like what he has done, especially during the pandemic.
Yeah, we also are going to have Paulina Luna on. She is an Air Force vet. She is from Pinellas County, and she won there, which is west of Tampa, Charlie Crist's old seat, when he decided to run for governor. She was endorsed by President Trump and by Ron DeSantis.
Right. By the way, Maya Flores did lose last night.
I know, down
and she
in
lashed
South
out
Texas.
at independents and Republicans that didn't come out.
They changed her district.
Right.
So.
Made it a little bit tougher for her to do that. So we'll see if she bounces back in 2 more years. Chloe Shimkus, you have the other breaking news.
Yes, I do. Got some more news to get to, and we're going to begin in Jackson, Mississippi, where an arsonist is in custody for allegedly torching 2 churches and setting 5 other fires on Election Day. Officials say all but one of the fires was put out before voters hit the polls. Thankfully, no injuries were reported. Elon Musk unloading nearly $4 billion worth of Tesla stock. That's nearly 20 million shares. It's the 3rd biggest sell-off by the CEO since he launched his Twitter takeover bid. Tesla hitting a 52-week low yesterday as many investors fear Musk is preoccupied with his social media venture. Forbes says Musk's net worth plummeted to just a mere $197 billion with a B dollars. And we are still waiting to hear who won the $2 billion Powerball jackpot. The ticket was sold at Joe's Service Center in Altadena, California. The owner receiving a big check for $1 million, and he now has a sign outside his shop that reads "Billionaires Made Here." The winning numbers are 10, 33, 41, 47, 56, and the Powerball number of 10. And there were plenty of other big prizes as well. A store in Florida sold a ticket worth $2 million, while 22 people had tickets worth $1 million. But listen to this. McDonald's unveils its first grease-proof gaming chair. It's packed with fast food-friendly features like a French fry holster, dip holders, a hot box for your burgers, and grease-proof leather. One lucky customer will get one for free. There's a catch, though. You have to live in Great Britain. So if you're British and you like gaming and fast food, today's your lucky day, guys.
So you have to buy a ticket to fly over there to get the bucket.
Yes, or you could just live there. So I'm sure that, yeah.
Well, they need to bring it here.
Exactly. Our British following of Fox and Friends will be very happy to hear that.
That would be on our bucket list.
Yes.
Thank you, Carly.
You're very welcome.
All right, 60 minutes after the hour. Major Republican victories in Florida, turning the Sunshine State red.
And that includes Paulina Luna, who flipped Charlie Crist's House seat, and she's going to join us next. We're still awaiting results for Arizona's gubernatorial and their Senate races, but election officials say that they will not have all the votes counted until Friday. Kelly O'Grady joins us live. Kelly, why Friday?
Ainsley, I know that's causing so much frustration from voters here on the ground that we're talking to. So Arizona actually has a history of mail-in voting, and then a lot of folks yesterday dropped their early ballots off on the day of the election, and you actually can't start counting them by Arizona law until the polls close. So that's why you're not going to see about 95 to 99% in until Friday. That means a lot of things could change, though, between now and then. So let's take a look first at where the Senate stands. 63% reporting. Democratic incumbent Mark Kelly leading by about 6 points. He heavily won in that early voting, but that typically does skew Democratic. And we're seeing the new batches skew heavily for the GOP. So Masters steadily closing that gap overnight. Now, another reason that could change and why we're waiting until Friday here, Maricopa County experiencing a lot of voting issues this race. 27% of counting machines in the county were down for a period yesterday. GOP candidates encouraging their base to vote on Election Day. So the current gap could tighten significantly as those votes finally get counted. Now, on the governor's election, it's a lot tighter. Kari Lake inching closer, just about 30,000 votes separating the two, and Lake has been winning the last few batches by 70 to 80%. I want to highlight she's been tough on the border, so we're really seeing that play out in how well she's doing in Cochise and Yuma counties right now. I did ask Lake yesterday if these vote counting issues would impact if she accepts the election with her opponent presiding over the count. She didn't address that, but she did say Hobbs not recusing herself is unethical. Still a significant number of votes left, though, roughly 1 million. So we'll be watching that gap in the Senate race because it certainly just became a lot more important after the GOP loss in the Pennsylvania Senate race last night. Back to you, Ainsley.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Meanwhile, Florida shifted from a swing state to a solid GOP overnight, with Senator Marco Rubio and Governor DeSantis both claiming victory, along with numerous House candidates, and that includes Paulina Luna, who flipped Charlie Crist's Florida House seat to red. Congresswoman-elect Paulina Luna joins us now. How does that sound, Congresswoman-elect? Congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's still very surreal. You know, we were honored to have the support of many residents, both bipartisan across the county. But, you know, we were outspent 12-1, so nothing can ever outdo a grassroots campaign, and that's exactly what we were.
That's exactly what happened with Marco Rubio, outspent and outraised, but he still won by 16 points. I think a little more than 16 points. Marco Rubio won by almost 20 points. Why are we seeing the red wave in Florida?
I think what happened after COVID is many people that were under a lot of bad blue legislation moved here, and they got active, not just in local politics, but national politics as well. And so that's why you're seeing a shift. But remember, we also have a very high percentage of the Hispanic demographic that's largely been voting more and more over into the Republican Party platform. And so we welcome any voters with new arms. As long as you're for limited government and lower taxes, come on over to the GOP.
Well, I know you're Mexican-American. You served our country as an Air Force veteran. You were endorsed by Trump and by Marco Rubio and some others in the great state of Florida. And you took Charlie Crist's seat. That's Pinellas County, which is right outside of Tampa. Is it normally red, or I know if Charlie Crist is a Democrat?
It was a lean blue seat last time. We were redistricted, and I'm very honored to say that I was also endorsed by Governor DeSantis. And so we did have a redistricting. I think that did play a factor. But, you know, at the end of the day, when you're looking at how much they really spent against us, on Friday, President Obama actually dropped a robocall against me. My opponent was funded largely by a billionaire out of Michigan. And so we did not have the financial advantage, but what we did have is the advantage of what was happening with the Biden economy and the fact that we are actually going to voters and asking for their votes, and we did it.
All right, well, we wish you the best. Thank you so much for coming on with us.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Coming up, deja vu, Republican Brian Kemp defeats Democratic favorite Stacey Abrams for the second time. He's going to join us live as he celebrates a second term as Georgia's governor.
All right, Governor Brian Kemp claiming victory in his re-election bid last night, beating out Democrat Stacey Abrams handily for a second time.
But the high-stakes Senate race in Georgia is still too close to call and will result in a runoff first week in December.
Connell McShane is live from Atlanta with more. Connell?
Hey there, Ainsley. It certainly was, as you guys were just talking about, an uneven night, right, for Republicans here in the state of Georgia. You had both Governor Kemp and the Senate candidate Herschel Walker appearing in front of their supporters last night. But Governor Kemp was there in a festive mood, celebrating that re-election victory over Stacey Abrams, whereas Walker had to vow to keep fighting because, indeed, he looks like he's headed to that runoff. And as you look at those numbers and compare them in both of those races, I want to go back for a moment to a voter that I actually alluded to when I was on with you guys in the last hour. This was a voter who told us he had just, moments before speaking to us, voted for Governor Kemp, but did not vote at all in the Senate race. Take a listen.
I kind of abstain from most of that Senate race. I don't really dig most of those people, so I just I left it alone. I kind of kept it more local, people that are actually going to affect me here.
So did you actually just vote in the governor's race but didn't even vote in the Senate race? Correct. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
So there you go. That kind of thinking, or perhaps the ticket splitters, those who voted for Kemp and then went for Warnock, leaves us where we are today. Still covering a Senate race that appears to be ongoing while wrapping up a Republican victory that I know you're going to talk more about on the governor's side. Back to you guys.
We are indeed. In fact, we're going to talk right now to the governor. Brian Kemp joins us right now from Georgia. Governor, congratulations.
Thanks, guys. Good morning.
Well, when you look at the numbers, you handily beat Stacey Abrams, and she has conceded. But Herschel Walker, if he got the same number of votes you did, he would be a runaway winner. But it looks like there was a lot of ticket splitting going on in Georgia. And as Connell was just talking about, there are some people who apparently voted for you but didn't vote for the Senate candidate on the Republican side. What is that about?
Well, first of all, I'm just honored to be able to continue serving as Georgia's governor. We've got a great state. We've got a great legislature. And the Republicans held the State House and the State Senate last night. Looks like we're going to prevail without runoffs and all our constitutional officers who are elected just like I am. So it was a really good night for us stateside. But look, it's good for people to remember with Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock, a libertarian in that race got, I think, about 2% of the vote last time I looked. So, right now, everything I'm hearing, it's headed to a runoff. There's still votes to be counted. We'll let them do that, see where it lands. But it's tough beating an incumbent. And, thankfully we prevailed last night because we've been putting hard-working Georgians first, talking to them about fighting through Joe Biden's 40-year high inflation, disastrous domestic energy policy that's led to high prices at the gas pump, a porous border, raising taxes on hard-working Georgians and hard-working Americans when he promised he wouldn't. And we've been cutting taxes here. So those issues prevailed for us and the down-ballot folks and our General Assembly folks last night. But if we get into a runoff, I feel very good about getting Herschel across the finish line. And, my goal's been for our whole ticket to win the whole time. That's what we've been working to do, and we'll continue to do that if needed.
Well, those issues did prevail for you in the state of Georgia. They didn't prevail for people around the country where we were expecting more of a red wave than we saw. I don't know if it was the polls were wrong, and we thought that because we would ask people what is your main issue, everyone said inflation. In Atlanta, they were saying crime. In New York City, they were saying crime. Why didn't those issues, was this more just pure partisanship? Did all those issues take a back seat?
No, not at all. The number one issue in this race, this was a pocketbook election in Georgia. It was inflation, it was jobs and the economy, which we've got just an incredible record here with the number one state in the country to do business. We've had 2 record years of investment and job growth in a row, and that's been going on all over our state, not just in the metro Atlanta area, literally giving all Georgians economic opportunity, no matter their zip code. But also people want to be safe, and we talked a lot about crime, supporting law enforcement, and not defunding the police and other things like that. I think around the country, I can't really speak to those races. I hadn't had time to look at them yet. But we also had a great team. We had a great plan, a great ground game that we haven't had in Georgia in the last cycle or two. And that was a big reason I think we overperformed from 2018.
Yeah, Governor, to tell you the truth, you and Ron DeSantis had similar situations. Closely won your governor's race, and you got renewed because of your performance. You did an outstanding job, and that's what I think the people responded to. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Have a great day, guys.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Indeed.
Thank you.
All right, Brian, what's coming up?
All right, up next, Fox News voter analysis shows majority of Americans disapprove of Biden's handling of the southern border. You think?
Former acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf breaks down how this could impact Arizona's races, which are still too close to call on this Wednesday morning.
Both Laxalt and Johnson slightly expanding their lead. What does that mean for the balance of power in the Senate? The border crisis playing a huge role in this election. As early as voter analysis reveals, most voters disapprove of President Biden's response, but yet he wasn't hit with a red wave. And it could have an impact on several major races still left. Arizona's Senate race and the governor's race are still too close to call this morning. Texas Governor Abbott won easily. Beto O'Rourke should retire soon. Let's listen.
We must escalate our battle against the deadly fentanyl that is pouring across our border. We must treat it like the crime that it is, and that is murder. Where and if Congress falls short, Texas must continue our unprecedented efforts to secure our border.
Oh, let's hope somebody joins Texas. Joining us right now, acting DHS Secretary, the former acting DHS Secretary, Chad Wolf. Mr. Secretary, I'll be honest, I'm disappointed that the broken, busted border that allowed 4 million to get in here illegally and 800,000 gotaways to come in did not really resonate substantially with the electorate.
Well, I do feel it's one of those top issues across the country. Look, I think voters are complicated and they're very smart, so they vote on a number of different issues. But you saw in Florida, Governor DeSantis, Governor Abbott, and certainly Carrie Lake in Arizona made immigration and border security a central part of their campaigns, and we saw 2 of them win. Carrie Lake in Arizona is still too close to call. So I think there are still some bright spots there. I think when you look at South Texas, we had a Republican seat member candidate there flip a seat in South Texas, and certainly in South Florida and Miami-Dade and the Hispanic community there who care very much about legal immigration and border security. I think you saw a number of wins and success across the board there.
So look, if the Republicans hold on to the House, and we'll have to wait till December, it looks like, to find out if they hold the Senate, if they get the Senate, what could you do if you only have the House?
Well, obviously, your options are a little bit limited. Two things. One is oversight. They can actually shine a light better by holding congressional hearings and holding the Biden administration principals accountable to the American people, try to explain why they have done what they have done to the border, and they have caused the greatest crisis along that border in our nation's history. 2, they can pass legislation to fix the border. Now, where that will go in the Senate and if it actually will get signed, I think that's an open question. But they can send a signal that at least in the House, they are ready to secure the border if the federal government and the Biden administration will not.
Right. And you also have a senator, all these Democrats saying, yeah, I'm going to secure the border, like Senator Kelly suddenly puts on his bomber's jacket and talks how outraged he is about our broken border. Any hope that they mean what they say?
Well, I think the proof is in the pudding there, right? You had a number of candidates that backed away from the Biden administration's policies along this border. Now, we'll have to see if they actually follow through with that after the election, should they be reelected. But I think that is an open question. I think there's more opportunity to fix the crisis along that border. I think if you see in poll after poll after poll, the American people do not support the Biden administration's approach to securing that border. And so I think you got to see what the House is going to do under Republican leadership and see what can be accomplished in the Senate.
You so optimistic something will get done?
I am. I am optimistic because I think it's such an important issue, and it's an issue that is really affecting Americans every single day, not only the human trafficking, but the fentanyl that's coming across that border. So I'm hopeful that obviously Republicans will have a solution, but I'm hopeful that Democrats will actually come to the table and want to solve this as well.
I would imagine, because it's going to be right in their face for 2024. Chad Wolf, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, listen, I want to get a weather update right now. Thousands of Florida residents are told to evacuate because the tropical storm Nicole is approaching the state's east coast. Residents are filling sandbags. That's how we got that video. Many people are lining up at gas stations and panic buying food and water, leaving some store shelves empty. Fox Weather senior meteorologist Janice Dean has more. Janice?
Yeah, we think this is going to become a hurricane before it makes landfall, and I believe that would be a record setter for a hurricane this late in the season making landfall across Florida. You can see the colder temperatures. We also have a blizzard, by the way, setting up across the northern plains in the Midwest. That's going to be a big story. Heavy snow across the Rockies and the Intermountain West and the Sierra. But this is the big headline for Florida. This is Tropical Storm Nicole, almost a hurricane right now. We do expect it to become a hurricane before it makes impact. We think the center of circulation circulation comes ashore around the Port St. Lucie area, but this thing is huge, 400 miles from the center of circulation, at least tropical storm force winds. We have hurricane warnings in effect. So this is Port St. Lucie. The rain impacts 3 to 5. We are looking at 3 to 5 foot storm surge. It's, depends when high tide comes in and the full moon and all that stuff. So that's going to be a big deal as we go through the overnight. And the rain forecast, we could see 3 to 5 inches. Some areas could get isolated amounts of a foot of rain. And then we also have a tornado threat. And I also quickly want to make mention that over 2 feet of snow is going to fall across portions of North Dakota. This is our next big weather maker across the plains. So foxweather.com for all of your latest details, especially if you live across Florida. And we'll keep you up to date. Brian Kemp, over to you.
All right. Thank you very much for the toss back. And with that, let me just be the person who tosses to Carly Shimkus to find out what you have to say about a bunch of layoffs.
Yes, I certainly do. We are starting with those layoffs that Mark Zuckerberg is going to be announcing. More than 11,000 Facebook employees will be laid off this morning. That's 13% of its workforce. He told employees today that he's accountable for the social media giant's missteps. That includes overstaffing. Zuckerberg specifically mentions cuts to the recruiting and business teams. Facebook parent company Meta says it will provide at least 4 months' salary as severance. This is Meta's first mass layoff ever. 1 in 3 families say they're falling behind financially. That's twice as high as 2020 records show, according to a new AP poll. Meanwhile, consumers are leaning on store credit cards to offset the budget crunch with the holidays right around the corner. 35% of Americans are likely to apply for credit cards this holiday season. That's a 29% spike from a year ago, according to LendingTree. And a trio of soccer fans on cloud 9 after a Real Madrid player launches a shot out of the stadium and onto their balcony. Wow, the booming kick courtesy of a star player on one of the most popular clubs in the world. The laughing home fans mocking the miss with shouts of goal, goal, goal. That ball is now reportedly being sold online for $200. Brian, over to you. I'm sure you have some thoughts on that.
I just want to tell you, I have roots in rock and roll. That's what Rod Stewart does before every concert. He gets Celtic balls and punts it into the stands.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
Good to know. You learn something new every day, and this is my moment.
Right. You don't have to wait for the break to learn from me.
Yes.
There you go, Carly. Thank you. Meanwhile, still ahead on this show, the balance of power in the Senate still up in the air as we speak. Pollster Lee Carter breaks down the election night's biggest winners and losers next. But first, the ultimate winner, Dana Perino, who worked through the night. For what's coming up on your show, Dana, there's still so much in the air. I know you want it all done by the time you woke up hammer.
I know. I was the winner yesterday, sitting next to you on the 5. Thanks for being with us. And you're right. We are still waiting on critical calls in the midterm elections. Some of those decisions could come in the next 2 hours, so we'll bring those to you if they happen. One of the things we know for sure, Ron DeSantis was a big winner in Florida, defied a national trend. So what is next for the governor? We'll have analysis from Brett Baer, Martha McCallum, Karl Rove, and Mark Penn. Just like you at home, we're sorting it all out. We'll take you through what happened and why it happened. We'll see you at 9.
From winners and losers to races left to be decided, a lot still close to call. Here with their biggest takeaways from last night's biggest races, Lee Carter, Meslansky and Partners president and author of Persuasion. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Okay, first of all, where's the red wave?
Well, there was one thing that I was calling this. I expected it to be more of a red surge than a red wave or a red tsunami. And so I think the polls were right in the Senate. They're really holding strong in the governor's races as well. I think they were a little bit off in the House, but at the end of the day, the Republicans, I think, underestimated how important abortion was to the election. 27% of voters went out there and said that was one of the most important deciding factors. And there's some other lessons to be taken away as well.
I was reading some of the other networks' exit polling. They said that abortion and democracy, which a lot of people on the political right were not talking about, those were actually the big issues with the majority of the voters.
So what was fascinating last night, we had a group of voters here in studio who we were talking to. And when they were talking about democracy, democracy being at stake. It just wasn't, I think, what everybody understood it to be. They weren't afraid that their their votes weren't going to be counted, as much as they were afraid that people weren't going to stand up for what was right. There were a lot of candidates on the ballot that they said were election deniers, and they really didn't like that. They wanted leadership that was going to take a harder stand on some of those issues.
How about, and we just bumped in with the race boards on Georgia, Brian Kemp ran away with the governorship on the Republican side, but Herschel Walker, as you can see right there, is still trailing by 9/10 of a percentage point. You would think that there's a lot of ticket splitting going on there.
There seems to be a lot of ticket splitting, and the same thing is true in Pennsylvania, where you saw a huge margin for Shapiro, and yet Fetterman is just inching it away. So there was a lot of ticket splitting, a lot of very thoughtful voters, and I think that what we're seeing is that the American people are saying, I don't love either the Democrats or the Republicans, and so I'm going to decide what's best for me on a state-by-state, issue-by-issue basis.
Right. And so, you know, when you look at the two parties, they both had their talking points. The Republicans talked about inflation, the border, crime and stuff like that. The Democrats were talking a lot about abortion and democracy and climate change. And while you got both sides, polar opposite, it's the people in the middle.
That's right.
Essentially do a little cafeteria thing. I like something from over here, but I like something from over there.
Exactly right. Now, the thing that I thought was fascinating, too, when we were talking to voters last night and across time, what I'm seeing is that not everybody thinks that inflation is within our control. About half the voters that were in the studio last night thought that inflation was a global issue that wasn't necessarily going to be changed by a change of power in Congress. And so I think the Republicans really failed to make the case that if they were going to win, that they were going to change inflation in meaningful ways. And the pivot went about a month ago from the inflation message being, look how bad it is, to the commitment to America, and here's what we're going to do about it.
I think the two big winners last night, obviously, Ron DeSantis.
Oh, yeah.
But also Joe Biden. Joe Biden won only because he wasn't the biggest loser. We were going to, this morning, had there been a big red wave, everybody would be going, blame Joe Biden. Can't say that now.
You can't say that right now. Now, I think the Democrats need to have some very serious lessons that they learn as well. And one of the things that we heard throughout the election period was that a lot of voters felt like they were being condescended, talking down to, and misunderstood by the Democrats. And so Democrats can look at this as a big victory just by holding their own. But there was a lot of money spent. A lot went into this to just stand still.
What about Donald Trump? He endorsed, I think, hundreds of candidates.
Yeah, I do think that what we're seeing right now is that the future of the Republican Party is ahead of us, not behind us. I think it's time, when you look at candidates like Kemp in Georgia, you look at DeSantis in Florida, you look at these candidates who stand for freedom, who stand for business, who do all of these candidates of action, that's where the momentum is. It's not coming from Donald Trump in the past, it's coming from the future.
All right, Lee Carter, she's up late last night and up early today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to step aside. More Fox and Friends in just a couple. Yeah, still a nail biter. Maybe today, actually, we could be back tomorrow telling you who owns the balance of power. Like to say thank you to the Fox and Friends staff that was up all night gathering all those numbers.
Job. We watched, I watched continuously, would fall asleep for an hour, wake back up to find out the results, go back to bed.
They never slept, so great job.
Martha and Brett and the whole team.
Also, we'll have a continuing
Bill Hemmer
coverage
did a great job
on the radio show, and you can also see that on Fox Nation.
Listen to his radio show.
That's right. In the meantime, for our friends down in Florida, there's a big storm coming. Be careful today.
Stay within yourself.
See you back here tomorrow.
Thank you, guys. Bright and early, 9 o'clock here in New York, still up in the air. That's what it is right now, the day after the election. The dust is hardly settled, right? Still floating out there in the air. I'm Bill Hemmer. Welcome to our coverage. Nice to see you, my lady.
Good morning. I'm Dana Perino. This is America's Newsroom. When you got a few hours sleep last night, did you dream of the board?
No. I don't know if it was a few. It might have been 60 minutes, actually.
Yeah, I know. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't a lot. But we are glad to be here and to take you through all of this today. We're sorting it through as well.
Yes, we are.
We are. We got some ideas, though.
A couple things here. Guys, just come back to us for a moment here. That's where we are right now in the House, 200 Republicans. I got a few more to go. Talked to Kevin McCarthy about an hour ago. Here is what he said. At the end of the day, we'll be in the majority, and it will be bigger than the Democratic majority as of today. All right, we're going to show you in the map a little bit about what he's talking about that. So that's what we're picking up from what could be the next House Speaker.
And while it might be disappointing for some, the number, it was interesting to learn this morning that this will only be the third time since 1954 that Republicans have retaken the House majority. So there's that you can hang your hat on.
So we got a number of issues to go through. How did abortion play? We're going to look at it in Pennsylvania. We'll look at it in Michigan. There was an AP wire that crossed about 30 minutes ago. There was a referendum in Kentucky that was defeated on the question of abortion to make it illegal in the state of Kentucky. So all this is right now, it's kind of on the grill, shall we say? It's going to marinate for the next 2 hours.
It is. Okay, so let's get to this again. Predictions of this red wave that we had talked about, it did fail to materialize, but the Republicans are still on the verge of winning the majority in the House, even if by a smaller margin than expected. And the Senate, meanwhile, now that is up in the air. You can see the Senate at 48 seats for Democrats and 48 for Republicans. So that leaves 4 toss-ups. We've been talking about these states: Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, and Wisconsin. Those remain too close to call. Votes, are still being tallied, and we cannot project a winner at this hour.
So stand on by, as we say, hon. Let's get to it. Conor McShane's in Georgia, Kelly O'Grady in Arizona, first to PA, where John Fetterman pulled off a victory. Brian Yennis begins our coverage live in Philly. Brian, good morning.
Bill, good morning. By 10:30 p.m. last night, Philadelphia had counted 50% of its ballots. Poll workers continue counting ballots in the warehouse behind me, working nonstop overnight, and they say they expect to be done by tomorrow. But with 93% of the votes counted in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, there's enough data for the Fox News decision desk and others to declare that Democrat Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman's current 3-point lead, or about 150,000 votes, will stand, and he has defeated Republican Dr. Mehmet Oz.
We bet on the people of Pennsylvania, and you didn't let us down. And my promise to all of you is I will never let you down.
So much of the focus of this race was on Fetterman's health after suffering a stroke in May. Fetterman refused to do more than one debate and refused to release his medical records. Instead, he attacked Oz as being an out-of-touch wealthy guy from New Jersey, and it worked. According to our Fox News voter analysis survey of more than 90,000 voters nationwide, one key to Fetterman's win was that a majority of Pennsylvania voters, 52%, say they were confident Fetterman was healthy enough to carry out the job of senator effectively. In fact, more voters were confident he was healthy enough to do the job if elected than were confident that Oz was familiar enough with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to serve it effectively. Dr. Oz made record crime in Philadelphia a cornerstone of his campaign, but according to that Fox News survey, Bill, only 8% of voters nationwide rank crime as the most important issue. The economy, abortion, immigration, and even climate change ranked higher. Bill?
Thank you, Brian. Back to you in Philly as we get more from there. Thank you, sir. Dana.
So Georgia Governor Brian Kemp has won re-election in his rematch against Stacey Abrams with no runoff. Meantime, with Senate control hanging in the balance, the race between incumbent Democrat Raphael Warnock and Republican Herschel Walker, well, that one is still too close to call. Fox Business Chief National Correspondent Conor McShane, he's in Atlanta. Good morning, Conor.
Hey, good morning to you, Dana. So the big story here in Georgia is either ticket splitting or perhaps voters doing what one man we spoke to in Gwinnett County, Georgia did yesterday. He said he had voted for Governor Brian Kemp, but he didn't vote at all in the United States Senate race. And as it turns out, it was a good night for Kemp. As you say, certainly a much better night than Herschel Walker had on that Senate side. Kemp able to win his rematch with Stacey Abrams, and he did so with more than 50% of the vote, able to avoid a runoff. Here he is last night.
I can't tell you how honored I am to be your governor for the next 4 years. Tonight, hard-working Georgians from all walks of life spoke with a clear voice. They know which direction they want their state to go, and it is forward.
A much different story as we focus in now on the Senate race is Walker in that race against Raphael Warnock underperformed what we saw from Kemp with a number of key demographic groups, and he brought in fewer independent voters in what was certainly a hotly contested race.
So y'all just hang in there. I'm feeling good. We always knew that this race would be close.
I'm like Ricky Bobby. I don't come to lose. And I told you he's going to be tough to beat. He's going to be tough to beat, but let me tell you what, he got the wrong Georgia here, don't he?
All right, look now at this nugget from our Fox News voter analysis. It shows that both Warnock and Walker were seen by the voters as having extreme views. 49 and 47%. They'll both get some extra time now to share those views and continue to make their case to voters, since, Senator Warnock is still below 50%. It very much looks like we're headed to yet another Georgia runoff. And that, of course, Dana, would take place on December the 6th.
And it's another beautiful day in Atlanta as well, based on that shot. Thank you, Connell.
So, Dana, we could throw a number of darts on the map already today and find you countless stories, all right? I just want to set up the Senate for you, where we think we stand right now. Then I'll show you a little bit of story about what's happening in the House. I'm going to bring in Brett right now, who just joined us as well. This is Nevada right now, okay? You've got some outstanding votes still, but Laxalt, the Republican, is hanging on to a slim lead right now. There's a little bit of vote out down here in Clark County. That's Las Vegas. Estimated voting about 80%, okay? So roughly maybe 20% of the vote in Clark County is still out. Up here in Reno, in the Washoe area, okay, so more of a percentage is out. And Laxalt was doing better, by the way, in that part of Nevada than he was down in Las Vegas. I mean, real critical move here now if Republicans want to try and fight for this majority in Georgia, perhaps a month from now, okay? That's on the Senate side. Much more detail throughout the show here. This on the House side. I think it's a very interesting story. It's developing. We talked about crime in New York State. We talked about Lee Zeldin doing really well against Kathleen Hochul. Let me bring that up for you. He lost, okay? But look at the margin. Look, in New York, Dana, listen, Republicans, they haven't come within 20 points in 2 decades. So he came within 5 at the current mark. If I go to the House lineup, however, New York 3, north coast of Long Island, north shore of Long Island here, that's a flip. All right, New York 4, South Shore, Long Island down here. Desposito, the Republican, leading right now, so that could also be a flip. Same part of New York, okay? Moving up here, the Hudson River Valley. Sean Patrick Maloney, head of the DCCC, trailing Mike Lawler. Lawler's going to join us next hour. We'll get his state of the race here. If he hangs on, that too would be a flip. Let me move a little bit more down here. 18, if Colin Schmidt can beat Pat Ryan, that would be a flip. But right now, not just yet. 19 would not be. 22 is Katko. So what you have in New York, you have the possibility, let's move on over here, that Republicans could flip 4 House races in the state of New York alone. And probably based on the strength of Zeldin's performance against Hochul.
I was going to say, I think Lee Zeldin deserves some credit for making that governor's race as close as it was, and that probably did help a lot of those congressional seats. And so the Republicans had a decent night in New York, not necessarily everywhere else. Brett Baer, how are you?
Good morning.
Good to see you.
Good morning.
Is it morning or
is it? I mean, it all rolls together.
I kind of think I saw you at 3 o'clock out there in the lobby.
It rolls on.
What's your take right now, based on what we're seeing and what we think is happening?
I think Republicans had a wave in exactly one state, Florida.
That's right.
Yep.
And Florida today looks more like Arkansas. I mean, there is no statewide Democrat for the first time since Reconstruction. And that is a huge story on the Republican side. I think that the Fox polling unit did a fantastic job. And I think we're going to see that our polls were very close to where we end up.
But turnout was?
Turnout was different. It was different. And I think that McCarthy may be right, that at the end of all of this, that he ends up with 5-6 seat majority. But heading in, 10 or fewer was considered a really bad night for Republicans. Looking at the environment, looking at the inflation, looking at the economy, looking at crime, looking at immigration, I think that abortion played a bigger role than we think it did in a number of states across the country. I think that it will be fascinating to see how the president deals with this and what his message is. Because when he makes a message, it will be a signal to everyone about where this administration
You
is
can
going.
imagine there was a lot of maneuvering last night at the White House where they were probably grateful that they didn't lose more seats, and they're also trying to think of where do we go from here, and then everyone's going to try to put something in that speech today. I want to mention one thing about abortion and inflation. So voters had said inflation is most important, but in Pennsylvania, when you look at that was the exit poll out of there for NBC News said that 35% of people said that the issue of abortion was their number one issue, and inflation was the next at 29%. So did we miss that in any of the polling or the discussions? And were they the quiet voter, right? You had like the quiet Trump voter from before. Were these the quieter voters, or did they just vote early and make their voices heard that way?
I think that there's a lot of people who voted early. I think that in every state, there were more and more people who voted early. In Pennsylvania, for example, if you look back, there's a ton of people who voted in August. Remember, the ruling happens in July. August happens. You've got all of September. You don't have a debate until October 25th.
Yeah, they started voting September 19th.
And so, you know, obviously, we don't know how much that debate changed the dynamic of the race, but we do know, had there been 3 debates, that might have been a different story. With that, it might have been a different story if it was a debate on September 30th in Pennsylvania. The bottom line is that there's, you know, all these states still out there that we have yet to count. But it's looking more and more like we're looking at a divided Washington, and that we're looking at a very Republican Florida. And if Republicans are talking about something, they're talking about the change in Florida and the way forward.
Big win for DeSantis. You got 67 counties. He won 62 of the 67.
Right.
I mean, extraordinary, too.
Including Miami-Dade.
What he did in Miami-Dade with Cuban Americans, that Democratic blue section of the state. Osceola County, we pointed out last night, strong Puerto Rican population just south of Orlando.
He was down 7 the week before the election. Down 7, DeSantis was, to Gillum 4 years ago.
In 2018, right?
And he pulled it
But
to...
competence mattered, and people saw what he was able to do over those 4 years, and especially look at that hurricane and how he handled it.
Listen, he won by 34,000 votes that year. Last night he won by 1.4 million votes. All right, so that's the story of Florida. I think what you're going to hear a lot for Republican analysts throughout the day is that the top of the ticket hurt them in various states. One would be Pennsylvania. The governor there, not a good performance. One would be Colorado. Joe O'Dea, the senator, not a good performance. Michigan, Tudor Dixon was unable to come back and topple Gretchen Whitmer, knowing that Republicans have gone after her now for close to 3 years.
You have different scenarios there, and there's going to be a lot of people that point to the former president. But Joe O'Dea was not a presidential endorsement. He was, in fact, pushed the former president away. Mastriano was. In fact, he had help from Democrats to get through that primary. He was supported. Tudor Dixon was. I think there's a mixed bag here. But that all factors in. And there's going to be a lot of talk about the 45th president of the United States and how much that influence or not influence impacted these races. And the closing argument seemed to work. It seemed to work. We didn't think it was going to work. We sat here talking about what threat to democracy and...
I was thinking about that last night about President Obama coming in with those last-minute rallies, and we saw kind of a different Obama. It wasn't hope and change Obama. He was angry, and he was demanding that they get out because democracy was on the line. And he was a good closer for them.
He's been a good closer. He was a good closer. And in Pennsylvania, they can point to, I think, moving the line. And President Biden... I'll be surprised if he doesn't say that he traveled to Pennsylvania 5 times.
Philly.
For all the grief, for all the grief he got about not going to other candidates, that was a place that he did go. Obviously,
that was their OK corral.
Yes.
Let's just pause for a moment here, okay? Because we're waiting on a Senate race in Nevada and a governor's race too, but the governor's in the lead right now, the Republican. Likewise for Arizona, the Senate and the governor's side. We've got a Senate race in Wisconsin that has not yet been determined, but when we went to bed for 60 minutes, Ron Johnson had the lead. He still has that slim lead as of now, and we believe, just like we left off at 3 a.m., that in Georgia they'll go to a runoff in all likelihood come the 6th of December, unless you get a major change throughout the day today.
So you're saying, what if?
Yeah, okay. Just hit that check mark
That
up
check
there.
mark up
Come
there?
on over here.
Yeah.
Go over, yeah, you got it.
You
Well
did a
done.
fantastic job, by
Thank
the
you,
way.
brother.
I mean, you really did.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. We had a
Really
good team.
good.
We did.
All right. Thank you, Brett. You're going to be with us all day today. All right.
Yes, sir.
So far. And Dana, we're going to roll on right now.
Here we are.
All right.
Okay. So the balance of power in Congress, it's still up in the air, as we've been talking about. But Republicans are favored to take back majorities in the House. Control of the Senate now hinges on just 4 races.
Also from Florida, voters made their voices heard loud, clear on election night. We will break down those results from the Sunshine State. Dana, coming
Plus,
up.
incumbent Governor Ron DeSantis, with a decisive victory, secures a second term in the governor's mansion.
Thanks to the overwhelming support of the people of Florida, we have rewritten the political map. Thank you for honoring us with a win for the ages.
22 years ago, Tim Russer would say, Florida, 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 right? So here is Florida in 2022, and Ron DeSantis with his 20-point victory over Charlie Crist. This was not on anyone's bingo card. Where did he win? He won just about everywhere. 67 counties in the state. He won 62 of the 67, including down here in Miami-Dade. When he ran for governor 4 years ago, he lost this county by 20 points. Last night, he won it by 11. He also won up here in Palm Beach County as well, which has been very stubborn for Republicans going back as far as I can remember, frankly. So that is the state of Florida. And Dana, let me show you this here. See that? 1.5, let's move on over. 1.5 million votes was the margin for DeSantis over Charlie Crist in the governor's race down there last night.
And we're going to bring in Mark Thiessen, former speechwriter for President Bush and a Fox News contributor. One of my favorite statistics is that last night Charlie Crist became the first person in history to lose statewide in Florida as a Republican, as an independent, and as a Democrat. I don't know what he goes from here. But Ron DeSantis had a huge night. Just huge. Look at the cover of the New York Post here. They called it "The Future." Of course, drawing that distinction. His approval rating, call for number 3, 64% approve. And he just is a very, very popular governor in Florida, and he won over constituencies that Republicans hadn't won in many, many years.
Yep, absolutely. Look, Florida was the silver lining in what was otherwise a very, very dark night. I mean, voters did us a favor. First, they reelected a great conservative Republican governor in Florida by historic margins. Second of all, they gave the Republican Party control of the House, which means that we can stop the miasma spending, right? And third, they gave the Republican Party a wake-up call. So 75% of voters last night said that they were not only didn't like the direction of the country, they were angry about the direction of the country, and yet they voted for the status quo.
Right.
So why is that? It's because the Republican Party did not give them a viable alternative to vote for. They were begging for a viable alternative. We didn't. In Florida, we did. We gave them viable alternatives in Florida. It's in the other states that we didn't, and as a result, we squandered an historic opportunity.
Mark, is that a message matter? Because a month and a half ago, the House Republicans came out with their commitment to America.
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell said, this is on Joe Biden. It's not on us to give you a reason to go out and vote. Sorry, just to be clear, that's a paraphrase.
Yeah, no, I understand.
There was lack of a message from the Senate.
Yeah, so it's a candidate quality issue. So we nominated a bunch of people that the voters rejected in a lot of these Senate races. We have a situation, we have the worst inflation in 40 years, worst decline in real wages in 4 decades, worst crime wave since the 1990s, worst border crisis in American history, worst gas prices ever recorded, worst food prices since 1979, worst increase in shelter prices since 1984, worst labor shortage in American history, which is fueling inflation, and Joe Biden is the least popular president in the history of presidential polling going back to Harry Truman, tied only with Trump occasionally. And voters looked at that. They looked at Joe Biden, and then they looked at the alternative the Republican Party was presenting them, and they said, no, thanks. Mm-hmm. And we need to do some introspection as to why that happened. And the answer to the question is in Florida. The answer to the question is, what worked last night?
Well, can that be replicated in other places?
I think it can be replicated nationally if you pick the right person. I mean, the voters looked at us and they said, we sent you a message in 2020. Did you not hear us? We don't want, and I say this with great regret because I probably spilled more ink in the Washington Post than any human being defending Donald Trump during his presidency. I'm not a never-Trumper, but the election denial put people over the edge. And at some point, the voters said, we don't want the chaos. We want conservative. In 2020, voters didn't reject Trumpism. They rejected Trump. There's a big difference. The Trump policies are extremely popular. So, I just gave you that stat about 75% say the country's going in the wrong direction. Before the 2020 election, Gallup poll, 53% of Americans said, they asked, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And 53% said yes, which is the highest ever.
Even in the middle of COVID.
In the middle of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, the worst pandemic since 1918, the worst racial unrest since the 1960s. They said, I'm better off now than I were 4 years ago under Trump. 53% of Americans didn't vote for Trump. Why is that? And you look at yesterday, 75% of Americans said we don't like the direction of the country, but they didn't vote Republican. We need to figure out, we need to give the voters of this country who do not want the miasma of spending, they don't want socialism, they don't want this left-wing direction the country's going in, a viable alternative to vote for, and we're not doing it.
Reuters just crossing right now out of Georgia, election officials quoted as saying, safe to say there's going to be a runoff for the U.S. Senate come 4 weeks
Here we go again.
from yesterday. So if Nevada holds for Laxalt, the Republicans, if Arizona holds for Kelly, if Ron Johnson holds on in Wisconsin, Georgia, 2 years later, yet again.
Yep. And it looks like we're, in all likelihood, we could be at the status quo, 50-50 Senate again. And so
So then you can write a column and you can say, what was this all about?
Yeah. If that happens, Donald Trump cost us the Senate twice in a row. And if you look at all the disasters that we've seen, the $1.9 trillion in spending, which unleashed all the inflation and everything we happened, if we had won Georgia 2 years ago, none of that would have happened. None of that spending, none of the inflation, none of this stuff would have happened. And now we're 2 years later, we have a chance to fix it, and we didn't do it. It's an indictment of the Republican Party. We need a very big period of introspection, looking in the mirror and seeing how can we present the Americans are begging for a reasonable alternative to what's happening in this country, and we're not giving it to them. And if we don't give it to them, then shame on us. And if you want to wake up I ask people watching this show, how do you feel this morning? Are you disappointed? Are you upset? Do you want to feel that way 2 years from now, on the day after the election? Because that's where we're headed right now if we don't change course.
Mark, thanks. Good to be with you last night. More coming up from you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Control of the Senate, just mentioned here, it's going to be decided by these states, Nevada, Georgia, Wisconsin, and Arizona, all too close to call. Also, Democrats seem to have avoided that red wave Republicans predicted. Maybe a high tide, but not a red wave. Can we say that, Dana?
Maybe.
Can we say that already? What a divided government would mean for Joe Biden's agenda. That's coming up next.
The American people are ready for a majority that will offer a new direction, that will put America back on track. Republicans are ready to deliver it.
Okay, here we go. President Biden has avoided a large red wave, but with control of the House and Senate still up for grabs, he may have to work with Republican majorities in both the House and the Senate, and that would sure be something. Lucas Tomlinson is live at the White House with more. Hi, Lucas.
Hi, Dana. It appears the president's strategy of not campaigning in battleground states except for Pennsylvania paid off. Here's House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy.
When you wake up tomorrow, we will be in the majority and Nancy Pelosi will be in the minority. Republicans will work with anyone who's willing to join us to deliver this new direction that Americans have demanded.
Nancy Pelosi says while many races remain too close to call, it is clear that House Democratic members and candidates are strongly outperforming expectations across the country. Despite President Biden not campaigning in battleground states, his wife did. Over the past 2 weeks, First Lady Jill Biden campaigned in 8 battleground states. While the final votes are still being counted, recall Mitch McConnell's warning, candidates matter. Most in GOP circles do not think Donald Trump had a good night last night. Others remain optimistic about the future, pointing to the strong gubernatorial wins by DeSantis, Kemp, Sununu, and DeWine. They also point to Trump spending only 15% of his war chest on candidates he supported. If Republicans can win a potential runoff in Georgia next month, it could be last year in reverse, Dana. And also one Democratic strategy that also appears to have worked, supporting Republican candidates that Biden called extreme. Dana?
All right, beautiful day there at the White House. Thank you, Lucas.
So let's bring in Mark Penn, former advisor, pollster to President Clinton, chairman and CEO of the marketing group Stagwell. Nice to see you, Mark. Hello to you. Slept on the cot last night. I'm sure you did. The great thing about you is the level of experience you have going back over so many presidential cycles. Put that in your big brain here as I introduce two numbers to you, all right? Joe Biden's approval rating, on average, going into this election was 43%. That was at the nadir, I would argue, of the past 30 years for presidents in this cycle. And this is what we found in our Fox News voter analysis. Did your vote express support for Biden? A quarter said yes. Did you oppose Biden? 39% said yes. Was Biden a factor or not? Biden not a factor, a little more than a third at 35%. What does that tell you about last night?
Obviously, Biden was a factor with his rating so underwater, with the economy and inflation really being the #1 issue. But, you know, this is what you have to be very careful about with polls. Polls are a panoply of questions, not just one. So if you were to zero in on Donald Trump's numbers, you would find Donald Trump was also at 43, 56, or 57 in your own poll.
Thereabouts.
Right? And so therefore voters who, to the extent they were caring about presidents, they were caring about both of these people. And I think that's pretty much what held this electorate pretty much outside of the United States or Florida, pretty much in check, because they didn't like Biden, they didn't like Trump, who really was the voice of the Republican Party and behind so many of the Republican candidates who had trouble last night, and so they stuck with where they were. And I think DeSantis was the exception because he broke through with real leadership, and also DeSantis and Kemp were, in a sense, independent of Trump. And I think that in those elections, the problems that people had with Biden really came through because Trump was not a factor.
So the House majority, Kevin McCarthy's office saying that they look like they're going to take the majority. So that does change, right? Because change things in Washington. The Republicans then take over the chairmanships of the committees. They can block things. They can try to send legislation to the president. If they have a Republican majority in the Senate, the president might decide to veto it. Based on your experience and maybe how different Biden is from President Clinton, what do you think Biden and his team will try to express today, or actually might do then in practice, if this is the reality that they're facing?
Well, look, this is what's so different about politics, is that you win by a little bit and it's a winner take all. Control the House or you don't. Now, in this situation, Bill Clinton said, I want to get reelected. I'm going to triangulate, I'm going to make deals, I'm going to show that I have a presidency that gets things done. I don't see Biden, who's now likely to keep his team, doing any of that. I think they may find some small things that they can cooperate with, but I think generally it's going to just be, let's roll to the next election.
You're suggesting this is an affirmation of his governing over the past 2 years.
I think that's the way they're going to come out and play it. I would be very surprised if they came out and said, we're sorry, the American people, we've led you astray, we're going to fix inflation, and we're going to do something about the border. No, they're going to say that everyone loses midterms. We really held pretty close to our majority. We're going to continue to push our message to the American people, and we're going to take it, and I think this stimulates Biden to run.
That may very well be. Was that last thing you said?
And then I think this definitely pushes Biden to run.
To run in 24.
Oh, absolutely. I think he believes he's the only person who can beat Donald Trump. Everybody who I speak to says he really wants to run. And unless he's restrained by investigations or health, he's running.
Okay, so you said, I'm sorry, Dana, this whole thing about investigations could very well happen. Because Kevin McCarthy could be the speaker or Steve Scalise, but it looks like Republicans at this moment will have control of the House. And there will be hearings, and there will be investigations, and there will be an opposing voice in government that has a majority in that case.
Well, I think either Joe Biden will be the nominee, or between investigations and health, if he can't be the nominee, he'll turn the presidency over to Vice President Harris. And you saw how well Hochul did in New York, right? Once Harris would get a chance to be the president. It's a little bit of a fantasy, I'll admit. But if you play the scenarios out right now, I think you're seeing Joe Biden, if he can, is going to dig his heels in, And even though only 40% of the Democratic electorate is saying they want him to be the Democratic nominee, he is going to want to be the Democratic nominee.
We're out of time, but answer Dana's question now.
Would Biden still want to run against, and would he win against DeSantis if that was the nominee?
If DeSantis does a knockdown, drag-out primary and beats Donald Trump, DeSantis would be virtually impossible to beat in the presidency against anybody.
All righty.
Well, you've been around.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Great to have you. It was
Thanks
wonderful to have you with us last night as well. Thank you so much.
One moment here, okay?
Well, we are watching two critical races in battleground Arizona. The race for governor between Katie Hobbs and Kari Lake. It's still too close to call. As is the race for Senate. Incumbent Mark Kelly holding a slim lead against Blake Masters. Plus, Republican Mike Lawler may be on the verge of pulling off an amazing upset victory in New York's 17th congressional district, taking down one of the Democrats' biggest names in one of the bluest states. Lawler joins us live, coming up.
All right, breaking news out of Pennsylvania now. Fox News can confirm that Dr. Mehmet Oz just called John Fetterman and conceded that Senate race in PA. The Democrat spokesman telling us here at the Fox News channel. We called it late last night, and Oz has conceded just a moment ago. So PA, the Keystone State there, goes
Senate race in the nation.
That's right, and that is a pickup for the Democrats, and therein lies the drama for the forecast for Wisconsin, Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona as we wait on that. Okay, battleground Arizona, mentioned that. We're watching two hotly contested races there. You've got a Senate race there. Democrat Mark Kelly's the incumbent, fighting to keep that seat. Republican Blake Masters trying to gain some traction there. The battle for the governor's mansion between Katie Hobbs, a Democrat, Kari Lake, the newcomer. Both contests too close to call. And Kelly O'Grady live in Phoenix to bring us up to date on what's happening there. Hey, Kelly, good morning.
Good morning to you, Bill. Yeah, too close to call is right. Election officials are telling us that we're likely going to be waiting until Friday to see 95 to 99% reported in, but that means a lot could change between now and then. So I want to give you some context on how and why this race is evolving. So let's start with the Senate. Okay, 66% reporting. Democratic incumbent Mark Kelly leading by just 5 points. Now he won heavily in that early voting, but Masters has been closing that gap overnight as day of voting day trickles in. Now, it's important to note the spread. Kelly started 18 points ahead. Masters has already made up 13% overnight, and we're seeing new batches skew heavily for the GOP. There's roughly still 90,000 votes separating the two, though, so that's a lot of ground to make up. On the governor's side, it's a lot tighter. Kari Lake inching closer. Just 12,000 votes separates the two. Now, Hobbs started the night at 14% higher, and that has narrowed to just under a point overnight. And the big reason is that Lake has been winning a lot of these batches by 70 to 80%. Of course, one of the big storylines, though, has been voting issues. 27% of counting machines in Maricopa County were down for a period yesterday. Election officials tell us that the snafu is with the printer. It was fixed by 1 p.m. The RNC, though, lost a last-minute suit against the county to keep those polls open an extra 3 hours. Here's Lake addressing the issues.
We needed another stark reminder that we have incompetent people running the show in Arizona. And if we have to take this fight through, we will. If it takes hours or days, we will.
Now, those voting snafus mean a lot of Maricopa County ballots are still outstanding in areas that skew Republican, and Lake and Masters encourage their base to vote on Election Day. Now, we're here at Maricopa County where they are tabulating. Over 60% of the residents are here in this county. We're expecting an update coming soon on how many ballots are still remaining, Bill.
Got it. Kelly, thanks. Don't go far, okay? Kelly O'Grady.
Yeah, she's going to be seeing a lot today. Well, let's bring in Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich, editor of townhall.com, and Jessica Tarlov, co-host of The Five. Jessica, let's turn it over to you. I mean, it was, even Democrats thought they were going to lose seats, and they were even pre-blaming Joe Biden with blind quotes in many of the articles. So what do you think made the difference?
Knives were out for sure, and now they're just butter knives, I think. There will still be an overwhelming feeling, and it's something that we talked about last night on air until the wee hours of the morning, and great job again, Bill, with the board there. And that Democrats are talking about today, which is this was a pass that we didn't necessarily deserve in terms of how the campaign was run, right? We were not on message. We were not on a message, frankly, that the exit polls showed that the American public wanted. And I think Mark Thiessen is right on it, and it's obviously a lot more meaningful coming from a conservative when they say it. But the Republican Party just did not give people a viable alternative to Democrats in this race. A lot of that was candidate choice, but a lot of that was policy, either policy that Americans thought was too extreme or, frankly, missing policy, especially on the inflation front. And when you talk about the commitment to America, which is the plan, the new contract for America that is very short and very light on details, I think people took that to heart. They said, okay, inflation is a problem. We're all feeling it. And the solution is tax cuts. That's not something historically that's going to help with inflation anyway. And you've got to have a better solution for people to that. So those were my big takeaways.
Katie? Well, conservative activists this morning are very disappointed in the results last night, and there are big questions about Kevin McCarthy. I talked to him yesterday, the leader. He was very confident that things would go well, not just in red states, but also in deep blue districts in Virginia, even in places like Washington and Oregon. I think there are big questions about whether the leadership got ahead of themselves when it came to winning this. The fact that we're sitting here this morning with all of the economic factors, with inflation, with Joe Biden's approval rating sitting in the low 40s without a full result on whether Republicans have even taken the House back at this point, says a lot about how things went.
Rick Scott, the senator from Florida, and his leadership of the NRSC, same?
Well, in August, Rick Scott was on vacation in Italy while the NRSC was running out of money. So, yes, there are questions about what his priorities were going into September, right ahead of people starting to pay attention. However, when you look at the numbers of where we're going to end up, Republicans, if they do end up with even a slim majority, one or two seats, that is gridlock in Washington, D.C. And voters would send the message that we would like the federal government to do less. We would like people to have debates and stop passing through these massive pieces of legislation that cause inflation that are passed by Democrats, that are passed by the vice president coming in and breaking ties.
So
in the
gridlock
Senate.
would be good then, Katie.
Gridlock is not a bad thing, especially when you look at the way that the governor's races went with Republicans. Republicans are still dominating state legislatures, so they're still dominating governor's races across the country. It's interesting to watch Florida, of course, and in New York, for example. I think Elise Stefanik, actually, with all of her work to get good candidates in these New York races, has paid off for her.
What I find oftentimes in these elections is we often revert to our home states. You're from Arizona. You're from New York?
Yep.
Am I right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I mean, in 30 seconds, what do you see in New York?
I see that people in New York are actually Democrats. And that it's really, and I've been saying that all along, it takes a lot to persuade a New Yorker.
But you're looking at 4 House seats that could flip from
Totally.
Democrat to
And
Republican.
I started talking about this a few weeks ago, that what was going to happen with Hochul is that she was going to win her race, but was she going to pull the people below her down? And it is a very big deal if Sean Patrick Maloney loses.
Zeldin may have pulled a lot of his people up.
I think so, but it is very hard. The MAGA branding, having the Trump endorsement, and frankly having such an extreme personal position on abortion, he accepted the fact that we have our laws here and that we're going to be protected. That is anathema to left-leaning voters and frankly to a lot of conservative, moderate Republican women who feel as though they woke up less free the day after the Dobbs decision, no matter what state they live in. And women are especially people who've gone through pregnancies, become part of this community, right, where you know what that feels like, you know about the trauma if you're going to lose that pregnancy. And so when you talk to women in liberal states who don't have anything to personally worry about, they're thinking about women in Louisiana.
Can you do Arizona in 10 seconds, Katie?
Look, I think the big issue yesterday in Arizona is the fact that 25% of the voting machines in Maricopa County, the biggest county in the state, were not working, was absolutely asinine, ridiculous, and just that alone, given the issues that we had in 2020, the fact that people have had questions about the legitimacy of their elections, if you don't want people to ask questions about the results, then you better make sure the election runs smoothly, and Arizonans deserve better than what happened.
Great to have you both.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
Thank you, and great job last night.
You bet. Thank you, Jess. Border agents working to stop smuggling attempts. We got a massive amount of drugs still coming across the border. Season 1 bus will take you there. J.D. Vance is a winner in the Buckeye State. How did he do it? We'll let you know when we go live there next. Still awaiting results. Arizona Senate race. Border crisis said to be very much a key issue for voters. And agents this week just made another massive drug bust. Bill Malusian back on the southern border, Eagle Pass, Texas. Bill, good morning there.
Bill, good morning to you. That's right. It's one of the biggest fentanyl busts we've ever seen, and it happened in Nogales, Arizona. Take a look at this photo right here. The CBP port of entry there. Officers stop an 18-wheeler big rig truck coming through. Inside, they find being smuggled 776,000 fentanyl pills, 289 pounds of meth and 55 pounds of heroin. Enormous bust. Then we'll bring it to where we are. Take a look at this video we shot earlier this morning here in the Eagle Pass area, Normandy, Texas. A large group of about 200 illegal immigrants who crossed into the Normandy area. As usual, mostly Cubans, Colombians, Nicaraguans. This sector has already had more than 50,000 illegal crossings since the new fiscal year began on October 1st. And lastly, take a look at this video. We joined the Texas game wardens out on the Rio Grande here in the Eagle Pass area. They're out there patrolling as part of Operation Lone Star. In literally less than 2 minutes of being on the water with them, we come across this group crossing illegally into Eagle Pass. It was a group of Cubans. You can see them kind of forming a human chain to fight against the currents. They go into the U.S. I talked to all of them. They told me they're all planning to go to Florida, Miami, and Tampa Bay in particular. Back out here live, Border Patrol in Yuma, Arizona, just reporting one of their agents down there was assaulted by an illegal immigrant who had an active warrant for murder out of Mexico.
The beat goes on. Bill, thank you. Bill Malusian, Eagle Pass.
Well, the voting is over and several key races are still too close to call, with control of the House and Senate still hanging in the balance. Well, welcome to a brand new hour of America's Newsroom. I'm Dana Perino.
I'm Bill Hemmer. Good morning and home. Morning to you. How you feeling? You feeling good and fresh?
I'm good.
Lee Ross is our producer out of L.A. He is in Las Vegas. He was at Democratic headquarters last night. He is saying the great unknown in this Senate race right now in Nevada is the mail ballots. How many are left to be counted? History tells us they break for the Dems, but are there enough right now to overcome the lead that Adam Laxalt has? He says both sides are expressing confidence, but they're both nervous too, but outwardly confident. As I go to the map here, Dana, you know, most of this vote in Las Vegas, Clark County, a lot of it's in, 20% is still outstanding, but you got some other red counties here that would favor Laxalt. So I think it's a jump ball, but Laxalt right now is holding on to that lead.
Yep, he certainly is.
So the red wave, Republicans were predicting, looking like a ripple. What did we say, high tide?
Maybe.
High tide?
Yeah,
no
high-ish,
wave? Okay.
high-ish.
Democrats performing better than expected, against, at least if you look at the polling before. With votes still being counted, we're still waiting for final results to learn who takes control. Team Fox coverage all over the map now. Mark Meredith in Ohio, Alicia Cooney in Arizona, Jeff Locks in Pennsylvania, Alexis McAdams live in New York.
Plus, we've got our all-star lineup here with analysis. James Freeman, Larry Kudlow, Jim Messina, and Martha McCallum.
But first, a look at where the balance of power stands as of 10 a.m. East Coast time for the House and the Senate. There it is, Mike Emanuel chasing down the key races in the battle for ultimate control. Mike, good morning to you. Welcome to our coverage. Hello.
Bill, Dana, good morning to you. On the Senate side, it is a 48-48 balance of power so far, with 4 races determining which party will be in charge. To be determined, Arizona, Republican Blake Masters versus incumbent Democrat Senator Mark Kelly. Kelly appears to be leading, but too close to call so far. Then there's Georgia, Republican challenger Herschel Walker hoping to defeat incumbent Democrat Raphael Warnock. The winner needs 50% or this heads to a December 6th runoff. In Nevada, Republican Adam Laxalt hoping to defeat incumbent Democrat Catherine Cortez Masto. A potential GOP pickup there, but too close to call so far. Then there's Wisconsin. Republican Senator Ron Johnson is leading Democrat Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, but it's also very close. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer is telling supporters what he intends to do if Democrats control power.
We want to protect a woman's right to choose. We want to protect the right to marry those who you love by passing the Marriage Equality Act. We want to fight to protect our democracy by securing the right to vote.
On the House side of the Capitol, where Republicans were clearly hoping for a red wave, our count is 200 seats for the GOP to 172 for Democrats. 218 is the magic number to hold the majority. House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy held a Take Back the House event here in Washington last night at about 2 a.m. Eastern, with plenty of races still to be called. McCarthy spoke to supporters.
Now, let me tell you, you're out late. But when you wake up tomorrow, we will be in the majority, and Nancy Pelosi will be in the minority.
Yeah. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi praised her Democratic members and candidates for strongly outperforming expectations.
All right, Mike, thanks. Mike Emanuel live in Washington. Thanks for that. We turn to Ohio right now. Fox News projects that J.D. Vance has defeated Congressman Tim Ryan in the U.S. Senate race there. Not a pickup. Republicans holding that seat after the retirement of Rob Portman. Mark Meredith, live in Franklin County, Columbus, Ohio, with more today. Hey, Mark, good morning.
Bill, good morning to you. Well, as you know, today Ohio Republicans are celebrating the news that they are going to be able to keep Senator Rob Portman's seat in GOP control. As for J.D. Vance, the businessman, the author, he'll be heading to Washington within a matter of weeks. For Vance, this victory came after a long, bruising campaign. You remember how contentious the primary was. He had to beat out so many different candidates, but he was able to continue to see success partially due to campaigning with the Ohio Republican ticket, as well as the endorsement and support from former President Trump. We've learned that also Trump and Vance spoke late last night after his victory. When Vance was on the stage declaring victory last night, he also vowed to focus on the issues, not partisan fights.
Whether you voted for me or not, if you're watching on TV, whether you voted for me or not, the thing that I promise to do is go to the United States Senate and fight every single day for the people of Ohio.
Vance's opponent, longtime Democratic Congressman Tim Ryan, tried hard to paint Vance as an extremist, but he also chose to criticize his own party, the Democratic Party, claiming they were out of touch on the issues which matter most. In his concession speech last night, Ryan also appeared to lecture both Vance and the country.
And I am concerned that this country, as we move forward, it may get worse before it gets better. When I called J.D. to concede, I told him, I said, you have got to take care of the working class people in this country, because the working class people have been forgotten.
Also want to mention Ohio Republican Governor Mike DeWine easily winning re-election last night. He campaigned heavy on efforts to boost the state's economy, talking a lot about jobs. His opponent making the race specifically about abortion. We were also watching another race down south in the 1st District near Cincinnati, where we saw the longtime Republican Congressman Steve Chabot lose to his Democratic opponent. But overall, Ohio Republicans very happy with what they saw last night, an indication they believe that this swing state is still trending in their favor as they move forward. Bill.
Thank you, Mark. Nice to see you in Columbus. Dana.
And perhaps the biggest Republican winner of the night was Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He handily defeated Democratic Congressman Charlie Crist with a much wider margin than expected. Here's the governor last night during his victory speech.
Florida is where woke goes to die. We not only won election, we have rewritten the political map.
Does this win thrust DeSantis into the spotlight for a possible 2024 presidential run? Well, joining us for analysis is James Freeman, assistant editor of the Wall Street Journal. That was one of Charlie Crist's attacks against DeSantis. He would say to the voters of Florida, why do you want this guy to be your governor? He doesn't want to be your governor. He wants to run for president of the United States. Well, that didn't matter, because if you look at the numbers, he had a 64% approval rating. I think that was our call for number 4 in Florida. And the voters said, yeah, we like him. We want him for another term.
Yeah, and you heard, obviously, these are his most enthusiastic supporters at the rally chanting 2 more years, because they actually want to see him run for president. But, yeah, they think he has succeeded. He's put a lot of points on the board. Some people might have thought that speech last night was a little boastful, but, you know, he's actually got a lot of achievements to boast about. And I think he is very formidable, and I think he'd be kind of crazy at this point not to run in 2024.
So let's take a few things off. There, call for 1 guys, then we'll go to number 2. New York Post cover says "de-future." It's pretty good, right? Okay. Wall Street Journal writes the DeSantis Florida tsunami. I'm going to read this, okay? This is these are your folks, all right, James? Mr. DeSantis is thought to have presidential ambitions. His victory speech sounded like it. A national campaign is a much larger challenge than running even a large state like Florida. Mr. DeSantis will have to cut down on his extensive use of the vertical pronoun if he wants to rally a movement. Clever wording there.
Oh, thanks on behalf of my colleagues. Yeah, he closed his speech last night saying, I fought the good fight. Maybe a little too much, but he's not overstating it when he talks about, first of all, rewriting the political map, winning Miami-Dade County, traditional Democratic stronghold, Palm Beach County, huge margin in what used to be a swing state. So he really has changed Florida's politics, and I think what gets conservative voters so excited is he has done it with a strong, confident, tough message of we are going to be free here. Economically, you go back to COVID. He talked last night about facts, not fear. There were so many times in 2020 and 2021, America needed more politicians embracing facts rather than fear when it came to COVID. And I think that is a case that is going to be very helpful to him if he wants to run again in 2 years.
So what would the timing of that be?
Of an announcement?
Well, I don't even know. I mean, a decision. If he and his family decide that they want to throw themselves into the ring, they would have a formidable challenger, of course, and the former president, Donald Trump. But if he decides to do that, I guess it would be within the next 6-7 months.
Probably very soon we would know. He's obviously got to start raising money very soon, and he's got to work on the communication because it's going to be a somewhat delicate mission here. He's got to say, I don't think he can say to Trump voters, if the former president runs again, you know, Trump wasn't actually that great. He didn't really achieve that much. I think he's got to say, noted, there were important achievements on taxes, judges, regulation, et cetera, under Trump, but I'm the guy now who can build a much broader coalition, and that's what he can show from Florida. There are just a lot more gettable voters for me than there are for Donald Trump, and you can trust me to hang tough on conservative principles.
Just want to emphasize this point. Dana referred to it a moment ago. His approval rating in Florida is at 64%. This is 2022 in American politics. You find me a politician who can match that number in America now. Governor, senator, president. Hard to find, if at all.
And I think for some people, this is a shock, because if you've been reading certain publications, some of them based in this city, you think that he's a very divisive, polarizing figure. Those numbers say the people of Florida view him as a unifying figure. And I think it's partly that, and maybe this is an argument why he's maybe the better option than Trump for Republican voters, is he picks battles. He fights hard, but he is pretty strategic, and he managed to beat Disney. Yeah. He managed to really beat the press when it came to COVID, and so I think he's a formidable guy. And if he was boasting a bit last night too much, you know, he does have some.
Well, I don't think Republican voters have shown that they don't mind boasting.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I don't know if that's really a problem.
So he's kind of low key.
But I picked up on it too. It's good to see you, James.
James, thank you very much.
Appreciate
So Fetterman wins in Pennsylvania now. Oz has conceded. They talked about 30 minutes ago. Live in the Keystone State. Coming up on that. Dana, coming up.
Plus, counting the votes in battleground Arizona. The race for governor still too close to call, as is the battle for a hotly contested Senate seat between incumbent Mark Kelly and challenger Blake Masters. We have the latest numbers coming right up.
Also, Republicans laying out an energy agenda if they take control of the House, giving Americans what would be much needed relief, perhaps at the pump.
And this climate change socialism has been a dismal failure. And yet the president is out there calling for an end to coal, an end to all drilling.
So got another update now. Sean Patrick Maloney's a Democrat from New York. He runs the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. He's going to have a press conference in about 42 minutes. He is not in his home state of New York. He is in Washington, D.C., and we will have Mike Lawler, his challenger as a Republican in that New York district, Hudson River Valley, New York 17. Lawler's coming up in a couple moments to join Dana and me. So stand by. Might have a call on that perhaps coming up soon.
That's right. Well, some high-profile races still undecided in battleground Arizona, where election officials say they will not have all the votes counted until Friday. So, in the race for governor, Democrat Katie Hobbs, Arizona's Secretary of State, holding a very slight lead over Republican Carrie Lake. While in the Senate race, incumbent Democrat Mark Kelly is fighting to hold on to his seat against Republican Blake Masters. Senior correspondent Alicia Acuna, she's been in Arizona for us. She's in Phoenix this morning. What do you know today, Alicia?
Hi, good morning, Dana. Well, we are awaiting results from hundreds of thousands of ballots that are going to come in from both Pima and Maricopa counties, the state's most populous. And we're talking about people who voted in person yesterday and those who also took their mail-in ballots, their early ballots, and turned it in. So we still have to wait for those. In the meantime, right now, no one is declaring victory. Last night, Democrat Senator Mark Kelly greeted his supporters and encouraged everyone to hang in there.
This has been a tough election. No matter how the rest of the results shake out, our government will remain closely divided with a lot more work to do. That can feel daunting, but that's democracy.
We did not hear from Republican Blake Masters last night. Heading into Election Day, he and Kelly were neck and neck in polling, so we'll have to see how the count plays out. In the governor's race, We were at the Republican watch party last night as it became clear there would not be a result. Here's Carrie Lake.
We had a big day today, and don't let those cheaters and crooks think anything different. If we have to fight through the BS and the garbage, then we will fight through the BS and the garbage.
Now, last night, Republicans filed an emergency lawsuit against Maricopa County Elections Division after 27% of the voting locations ended up with tabulation machines that weren't working properly. The county says it fixed what was a printer issue, but the GOP said some voters ended up not voting as a result. The judge in the case disagreed with that, denied their motion to extend voting hours. On the Democrat side, Katie Hobbs acknowledged getting this could take a while.
But we need to be patient and wait for every vote to be counted, because every single vote matters, and every single vote counts equally.
So, Dana, folks are going to want to stick around because a little later on this morning, we're anticipating an additional 300,000 ballot counts from Maricopa County. Things could be changing here soon.
That could change a lot.
Dana.
Okay, Alicia, thank you.
Thank you. From Arizona, Republicans, meanwhile, saying that energy policy will be among their top priorities if they take control of the House. House Minority Whip Steve Scalise slamming President Biden thus far. Check it out from yesterday.
He was okay with drilling when he begged Russia and Saudi Arabia to drill for oil. He just doesn't want America to do it. And the problem is we do it better than anywhere else in the world. We're going to bring bills through the Energy and Commerce Committee, the Natural Resources Committee, to open that back up again. You need a president that would be willing to sign them, but we need to give President Biden that opportunity. Will you sign or veto that bill? He needs to be put in that position.
All right, Larry Kudlow, host of the Kudlow Report. Actually, it's just Kudlow. No report needed on Fox Business. How you doing, Larry? Good morning to you. Mark Penn was on with us last hour, okay? And he said these results, if he were Joe Biden and Ron Klain interpreting these in the West Wing today, that this would be an affirmation of their policies and there would be no change in policies. That would seem to include, perhaps, an energy policy. Where do you think that goes, if anywhere?
Well, I mean, it's very speculative, okay? The House is going to be Republican. The Senate, we're going to see. I don't think you can really conclude from your own reporting, both of you, last night. We were all up, not as late as you, but we were up late last night. So I think what Steve Scalise said is very interesting. First of all, it's very important to take the handcuffs off the oil and gas business. Let's drill, let's permit, let's pipeline. We need to supply more barrels per day. I mean, we're still about 3 million barrels per day short of where we should be. And this translates into lower supplies, in fact, shortages of home heating oil, shortages of diesel, and in some cases, shortages of natural gas. This is all to help heat America during the wintertime. So this is a problem. Prices are way too high. High prices finance Vladimir Putin's war in Ukraine, et cetera, et cetera. So the goal here, I think, has to be take the handcuffs off, turn the spigots on. Now, in terms of how the Bidens play this out, we'll have to see. I mean, he made it very clear. He doesn't want to drill. He wants to end coal. He, by the way, does not have the authority to end coal plants. Just want to put that in there. There'll be a battle. The House will put up bills, okay? Whether deals can be made or what the Senate composition is going to look like, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say this morning. But again, we have a problem here. We have a recessionary economy. We have an inflationary economy. One of the key points to solving that would be to turn the spigots back on and end the war against fossil fuels. There's other stuff. Stop the spending, which the House will do. No tax hikes, which the Republican House will do. So those are good things. Stop the bad stuff. Getting good stuff? I don't know. You know, you guys tell me. Dana, I don't know. What do you think, Bill? What do you think?
I don't know.
It's going to be divided government.
There's going to be divided government, and, you know, gridlock is not necessarily a bad thing. We'll see how the markets react. They've maybe already sort of factored that in. So those big spending bills are not going to be in place. But I do think that the presidential election starts this afternoon when you hear from President Biden, so we'll see what he says there. I just want to put up a couple of numbers for you, Larry. This call for number one, condition of the nation's economy. This was in our Fox News voter analysis. Not so good or poor. Look at that number, right? It's like, what's that, 78%. And yet, Larry, independents, whereas they usually go for the out party in a first midterm of a presidential term, they didn't this time. They split evenly, and that allowed Democrats to hold on. Some of those races were very, very close. But a lot of them held on, and the red wave didn't materialize. Why do you think?
Well, listen, of course I have to agree. The numbers are the numbers. The cavalry was coming. It suffered some casualties. I think it became a regiment. It suffered more casualties, and I think it was down to a platoon. But the platoon was able to take the House. That's the way I'm reading it right now. Whether they got across the street to the Senate remains to be seen. But look at Biden gets very low marks on the economy. All right, that's not going to change. I'm not an optimist on the economy. It's not about, I'm not being political here. I'm just saying, look at the housing prices coming down. The whole housing sector is poor. Manufacturing is stalling. Real wages have fallen for 18 or 19 consecutive months. The inflation rate is still holding at close to 8% on the CPI, and the Federal Reserve is going to be tightening every month and shrinking the money supply. So you're setting up for 2023, you're setting up a very difficult, let's call it a stagflationary type economy. And you would think that the president would want to work with the House and the Senate to produce pro-growth legislation. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that yet. But that would be the optimal, and part of that pro-growth legislation would surely be to turn on the spigots. Get more supplies out there and lower the prices so ordinary folks, working folks, can afford it.
You make sense. I'm not sure you're going to get your wish under this administration. Larry, we'll see you at 4 o'clock,
yeah,
okay?
Thank you, Larry.
Business, thanks for getting up with us today.
Thanks for being on last night.
Go ahead.
The platoon is coming.
You might be the first to have ever said that.
Grab your pitchfork.
All right, despite a late surge in the polls, Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin, he did fall short in his bid to unseat Democrat New York Governor Kathy Hochul. We have a live report ahead. And the Pennsylvania Senate debate appears not to have hurt Democrat John Fetterman's chances of winning. The lieutenant governor defeated Dr. Mehmet Oz, flipping that seat from red to blue. Our complete election coverage will continue.
So, battleground Pennsylvania, Dr. Mehmet Oz again calling John Fetterman earlier today, conceding that race. And Jeff Flock out of Fox Business is in the state capital of Harrisburg. How goes it, Jeff? And good morning.
Bill, good morning to you. You know, Dana mentioned that debate that took place between Oz and Fetterman. It's worth noting that before that debate, Fetterman had been far ahead in the race, and he ended up holding on to win. Pictures of him last night greeting his voters in his characteristic hoodie and jeans, tattooed arms. He will be quite a figure on the floor of the U.S. Senate. I don't know if you're allowed to wear a hoodie on the floor of the Senate, but I guess we'll find out. This campaign may have been as much about how John Fetterman looked as what he had to say, but here's what he had to say last night.
For every job that was ever been lost, for every factory that was ever closed, for every person that works hard but never ever get ahead, I'm proud of what we ran on. Standing up to corporate greed, making more things right here in America and right here in Pennsylvania.
Now, Bill, some people think that the gubernatorial race, the one that had Doug Mastriano, the Republican, against Josh Shapiro, the Democrat, may have dragged down the Oz campaign. Mastriano was drubbed in that race, and he sort of ticked a lot of people off by talking about as how governor he could take over voting machines, and he was opposed to abortion with no exceptions in any case. You know, we spent a lot of time in the last, several weeks talking to voters in Pennsylvania. Make no mistake, the #1 issue for them now still is the economy. Even people that don't like how Joe Biden has handled the economy apparently voted for Fetterman. I guess it really came down to the fact that they think when it comes to the economy, maybe a guy in a hoodie and blue jeans with tattoos on his arms has more of a sympathetic feel than a guy educated at an Ivy League school with a lot of money who moved into the state just a few months ago.
Quite a stunner coming off that debate. Jeff Flock, nice to see you in Harrisburg, PA.
Excited to bring in Jim Messina, former White House Deputy Chief of Staff under President Obama. You know politics just about as well as anybody else. Like, maybe get your overall take about the election results. I mean, even Democrats were thinking that the night wasn't going to go that well for them. There were blind quotes pre-blaming Biden administration and others, and yet it turns out they did pretty well.
Yeah, look, this morning lots of Dems are saying, oh my God, that was much better than we could have expected. Surprising. Once again, the polls were wrong for the fourth consecutive cycle. They missed this wave of Democratic women voting. The big winner last night was democracy. We had massive turnout all over the place. That is incredibly interesting and important. The other thing is people criticize Biden for steering into the democracy argument, and it clearly worked with his base. I mean, you look at these races, and they just have massive turnout from both parties. You would expect it for the Republicans because they're out of power. You didn't expect it from the Democrats. And I think it's just overall great. We're going to have the largest midterm election turnout in the history of the country.
Okay, Jim, people are waking up today to say, what in the world happened, all right?
Yep.
You know, I mean, Dana and I were like, our thoughts are spinning between our ears right now. Let me try and do this for you, okay? Florida was a win for the Republicans. Agreed?
Agreed.
Ohio was a win for the Republicans. Governor and Senate.
Agree.
A couple House races we can debate whether that was the case.
Our captor wins and a surprise.
New York State was a win for Republicans when you consider the House races that will, in all likelihood, flip at the end of the day. Agreed on that?
The governor's race notwithstanding.
Agreed. Well, he came within 5 points, which helped the other House members.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'm trying to push forward to this point in the upper Midwest.
Yep.
And that takes me not just to Pennsylvania, which I think we can say was a clear win for the Democratic Party.
First time since 1966, Democrats
at the
held
Senate
that
level
Senate
and the governor level. So now I'm in Wisconsin, okay?
Yeah.
And as of now, this is a win for Republicans because Ron Johnson is hanging on.
Yeah.
And Danny, if you remember, we were talking to...
What about the governor's race?
Evers won that.
Yep.
Was it a month ago when Kevin McCarthy said Wisconsin is the new Ohio? I do believe that was his quote.
I'll just say yes.
Like the Wisconsin was that close. Now we go to Michigan. All right, this was a race where several races in that state.
Yeah, tsunami.
Republicans piled a ton of money in there, and they lost Congressional District 7 to Alyssa Slotkin, and they just lost Congressional District 8 to Dan Kildee. They thought they could flip both of them.
And they lost the House and the Senate and the Supreme Court.
Right, and so in Michigan, there's a statewide referendum on abortion.
Yep.
Is that what we are led to digest this coming weekend as perhaps the decider in some of these
Absolutely.
states?
And I think it's partially why you saw this big unknown wave of Democratic women voting out of this anger. You had the best example. Michigan, unbelievable. State House flips, state Senate flips. 6 months ago, you would have written Whitmer off, pre-Dobbs. She wins handily. 5 states had abortion referendums, including my home state of Montana. All of them passed. I mean, this abortion is becoming the issue that's driving turnout. Last night, exit polls, you guys talked about it earlier, Democrats win independents in a non-presidential year. Just no poll saw that coming. And it was because these women just went crazy.
Kentucky had a referendum to make it illegal, and that was defeated.
Correct.
In a red state like Kentucky.
So do you think that in 2024 you will see any state that didn't have a referendum put that on the ballot to try to help Democratic turnout in a presidential election?
If I'm involved, I will. Absolutely. We're going to go and do referendums in these states. First of all, because you have to now. It's state by state. That's what Dobbs did.
Yep.
Second of all, it's good politics. And third of all, it is proof that this is going to be the defining issue in the presidential election.
Jim, thank you.
How would you fix polling?
Fire all of them and stop doing it.
Okay. So stop doing it?
Yeah, stop doing it. Like, it's been wrong over and over again.
Should we stop paying attention to it?
Yeah, stop covering it.
All right.
Have a good trip home to Montana.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just look at this live look. Ron DeSantis is about to speak, but it's not about last night. It's about this tropical storm that's brewing off the eastern shores of Florida.
So governor's going to governor.
Yeah, that's not the governor. That's the guy testing the line, right? Okay. Jim, thank you. To Florida Live, we go in a moment. Fox News has not yet called this House race in New York 17. The Republican challenger, Mike Lawler, slightly ahead as of now. Sean Patrick Maloney will hold a press conference in 21 minutes from Washington, D.C. This would be a huge loss for the Democrats and a big pickup for the Republicans. We will take you to Mike Lawler when we continue in a moment after this. So now, moments ago, Fox News can confirm that Sean Patrick Maloney, the head of the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, has just phoned Mike Lawler, the Republican in New York's 17th Congressional District, and conceded that race to the Republican. Mike Lawler will be our guest in a matter of moments here, so we'll talk to him.
Incredible outcome.
Sure is.
They went after the king, and they got him. So Mike Lawler will be here in just a moment. And incumbent Democrat Kathy Hochul of New York has won New York's governor's race against Republican challenger Lee Zeldin. So Hochul is now the first woman elected governor of the Empire State. Yes, that's true. Alexis McAdams is live in New York City. She's been following all of these New York races. Good morning, Alexis.
Good morning, Dana. That's right. A very historic night for Governor Kathy Hochul here in deep blue New York. But Congressman Lee Zeldin says it's not over yet. Take a look here. These are the latest numbers that we have right now this morning. Governor Kathy Hochul with more than 52% of the vote, and Congressman Lee Zeldin with 47%. This is more than 93% of those ballots have now been counted. Although it was a Democratic victory last night, the race was much closer than expected in deep blue New York, which is why it was in the spotlight in the first place. Last night, Hochul took to the stage at her crowded watch party to thank her supporters, focusing on moving forward in her first full term as governor.
I'm not here to make history. I'm here to make a difference. And because of all of you, we'll keep making progress, breaking down barriers, breaking glass ceilings, helping New Yorkers achieve the greatness that it is capable of.
But over at the Zeldin watch party in New York City, where I was last night, that party-like atmosphere really continued, Dana. Although Hochul was in the lead, the Republican congressman was closing the gap on the incumbent for weeks, hammering home crime and the economy as his top issues. Zeldin did not concede, saying he's going to wait for all of the votes to be counted.
So what's going to happen is that over the course of these next couple of hours, you're going to see the race continue to get closer and closer and closer and closer. This includes, by the way, on Long Island, you're going to see a massive victory coming out of Long Island.
So Zeldin is going to wait for those votes specifically out on Long Island, on Suffolk County, where he is from. The county had some problems with reporting due to some technical difficulties. Reportedly, we reached out to them for more information. But still, this close race, Dana, obviously helps some other candidates who are Republican right here in New York.
All right. Alexis, thank you.
So control of the Senate still up for grabs right now, even after Democrats flip that seat in Pennsylvania. What's going to happen in Georgia, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona? Martha McCallum's got some answers. Hello to you.
Good morning, yeah, you have all the answers. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Yes, I have all the answers. Let me look into my crystal ball. I mean, you go into the Wayback Machine, right, when it comes to Georgia. And having it come down to a question of Georgia will put us right back to 2020. You know, we were talking in the break. I went to bed last night kind of going, you know, what happened? How do you make sense of all of these different things? And as Jim Messina was saying, you know, actually our polling, our Fox News voter analysis was pretty strong last night. When you go back through it and you look at what the information that we got from voters as they came out of the booth, and also people who were voting prior to that. But I think that it solidified the fact that the country is, you know, dug in most parts of the country, right? Where are the variables? The variables are in Georgia, Arizona, right? And you're right back to where you were in the last presidential election. Florida was sort of this kind of amazing anomaly, you know, to watch last night. You have to wonder. I look at New York, I look at Lee Zeldin, and I said last night, did all of Lee Zeldin's voters move to Florida during COVID? And that may be what prevented him from being able to get the 1.4 million that he would have needed in New York City. I also think that when you have people who, you know, are so dug in on both sides, you can't move them all at once. It's an incremental, slow process of people deciding to change their minds about certain things. I also think we live in incredibly uncertain times. I think people are very deeply unsettled. So change is hard. When you walk into that voting booth, maybe you're saying, you know what, I'm sticking with the governor that I have, right? I think there are also a lot of questions about candidate quality, which we talked about a lot last night, and I think that's going to be a major reevaluation. And I also think that the issue of abortion was the sleeper issue in this race. And I always wondered, as we followed this, How could it be possible that an issue that has had money poured into it for my entire lifetime, and groups who dedicated their lives to lobbying on either side of this abortion issue, how could it be possible that the Supreme Court overturns it and it has barely an effect on an election, right? So either I thought all of those millions of dollars were for nothing, the American people are okay with this decision ultimately, or not. And that's what we found. And I think that the voter turnout effort on that part was a very deep underground that really percolated last night, and I think we saw it. And I also think it saw, when you saw some of those split ticket decisions, people said, I'm going to keep that right. And we saw the referendums that you guys talked about in a number of states. We saw what happened in Kentucky, where people did not want a more strict version of the Kentucky law. So I think that it had a real impact.
And the youth vote was up, especially in places like Wisconsin and Michigan in particular. And Jessica Tarlov just told us that they had same-day registration in Michigan. University of Michigan had lines around the blocks in order for people to wait and be patient, and that was one of the issues they voted on.
No doubt. And I was on a call the other day with a Republican strategist who was talking about how, we just left that issue to the side. We decided not to basically talk about it. And I think that was a mistake. I think they needed to articulate the difference between the Supreme Court decision and how now every state gets to decide what their rules are. And we see them upheld across the country when these opportunities, starting in Kansas months ago. They just chose not to talk about it. They didn't feel like it could move their voters. And I think that's probably a mistake.
Great job last night to you and Brett.
Yes, wonderful. You both as well.
I don't know where we're going to be in 4 hours, but you will know because you'll be on.
We will
see you on the story.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right. So Ron DeSantis is at the microphone talking about the storm.
I think he might be finished, though.
So that's done. We'll let you know. We'll let you know what happened there.
All right. So just
to be continued on the storm, though. I think he'll be back.
The Democratic Congressional Campaign Chair, Sean Patrick Maloney, he has called our next guest and conceded the race in New York's Congressional District 17. This is a flip for the Republicans. New York Congressman-elect Republican Mike Lawler. There he is. He's going to join us next.